whose reign and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom, and understanding, we, thine unworthy servants, here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations. And grant that, we having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the results of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the Queen, the public weal, peace and tranquility of the island, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
This meeting of the Honourable Senate for Friday, April 23, 2021 is called to order. And before we begin the proceedings for the day, I bring to the attention of the Senate the passing of Mr. Joseph Mafood, a businessman, principal of West Sinker Group, but known or recognized today as being the founder of Food for the Poor, a charitable organization that has done a lot for persons not only in Jamaica in need of assistance, but through the Caribbean region. And I ask the clerk to write the appropriate missive to his family. Now, subsequently to the passing of Mr. Mafood, and recognizing that over 750 Jamaicans have lost their lives as a result of the COVID pandemic in this country, I wish to make it clear that we mourn and offer condolences to the passing of every single Jamaican who has died during this time. And we do recognize the hurt that is visited upon family members who lose people at this time, when even going to the hospital to see your loved ones is impossible. However, having said that, I ask the Senate to as well to recognize, yes, the 750 odd Jamaicans who have died, but specifically attorneys Mr. William McCullough, who is the husband of the former Chief Justice, Honourable Zayla McCullough, and Captain Paul Beswick, who is an attorney at law and the husband of sitting Supreme Court judge, and the senior puny judge, Ms. Carol Beswick. And I would ask that the House clerk writes accordingly. And of course, Mr. Michael Sharp, a veteran journalist and a lecturer who passed very recently. And we ask that note be made of their passing and that the appropriate letter be sent to Mr. Sharp's family. It would be remiss of me not to point out how abhorrent it was for me to hear that the public health nurse that had given him his vaccine was suffering or receiving threats to her life. In having said that, I certainly record the gratitude of this Senate to the frontline medical staff and the public health staff who have been managing this pandemic. So on that somber note, I ask statements by ministers.
Mr. President, I would, of course, add my own condolences on behalf of the members on this side, or sympathies to the families, the colleagues, and loved ones of all who have passed, and in particular, of course, the individuals who you have singled out by name. Mr. President, I do have a statement this morning, and it is in relation to the work of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade to coordinate relief efforts for St. Vincent and the Grenadines, as well as a very brief update on the arrival of a number of Jamaicans who had been affected by travel restrictions in respect of the United Kingdom. Mr. President, thank you. Members would be aware, of course, of the humanitarian disaster which threatens our Caribbean brothers and sisters in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. After 4 decades of inactivity, the La Soufrière volcano began spewing smoke and rumbling last December, in the lead-up to a full-blown eruption a few days ago. Since April 9th, La Soufrière has been spewing ash and emitting pyroclastic flows. Small earthquakes and rockfalls have also been recorded. According to the most recent situational update from PAHO and supported by NEMO and SEDIMA, between 16,000 and 20,000 persons are expected to be displaced. Entire villages have been covered in ash, which has destroyed crops, livestock, and tainted sources of potable water. Mr. President, the disaster risk responses of CARICOM have been activated and are concentrated in the Eastern Caribbean in accordance with the sub-regional groupings of the SEDIMA framework. However, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade continues, as we are brothers and sisters in this region, we continue to be in contact with the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and ODPEM continues to work with SEDIMA. Mr. President, of course, this Honourable Senate would have taken note of reports in the public domain which already would have indicated that Prime Ministers Gonsalves and Holness have spoken, and Jamaica has pledged its support in respect of the provision of our DART team, as we have for Dominica previously and the Bahamas. Members would also recall that Jamaica is actually focal point for the Northern Caribbean in respect of the SEDIMA framework. So, but we have helped in the Eastern Caribbean before, and accordingly will continue so to do. Our disaster response machinery, led by the Ministry of Local Government and Community Development and Rural Development, through ODPEM, continues to compile disaster relief assistance ultimately bound for St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The DART team, the Disaster Assistance Relief Team of the Jamaica Defence Force, stands ready to deploy if requested, as discussed between Prime Ministers Gonsalves and Holness, and we have engaged the Canadian government, who provided airlift before, to be at the ready as well if we are called by our brothers in that country. ODPEM has set up a special account for the receipt of donations, and I want to take the opportunity to read those details. The name of the account is a donation account for St. Vincent Relief, and it is located at the NCB Oxford Road branch. The account numbers, and I'll repeat them because I know that persons will share it on social media and persons will take note for their own personal use within this Senate and otherwise. The account number at the NCB Oxford Road branch is 387304. And again, it is the donation account for St. Vincent Relief, and we encourage all Jamaicans and friends of the Caribbean to give generously. Mr. President, the government and people of Jamaica stand in solidarity with the government and people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines during this most difficult time. We recognize that the challenges regarding management and recovery from the pandemic are now compounded by this ongoing series of events. The government is making every effort to provide humanitarian assistance through all our organs, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade has been part of coordinating efforts locally as well as overseas through our missions, based on a needs list provided by the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and indeed they are being shared within the OAS and the UN and otherwise, and they update from time to time as we have regular meetings as well. We remain in contact with them, therefore, through the Foreign Ministry as well as through ODPEM and SEDIMA, and of course, the representatives of the JDF are also in contact. Mr. President, as a result of our Foreign Ministry's engagement with our counterparts in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and in particular Minister Henfield, my counterpart, and supported by our respective defense forces, more than $20 million worth of support is currently bound for St. Vincent and the Grenadines aboard the HMBS Lawrence Major, a vessel operated by the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, and it set sail from Kingston yesterday. I'm pleased to celebrate this collaboration with my colleague Foreign Minister in this demonstration of Caribbean unity, enabling transportation of goods from Jamaica to our brothers and sisters in need. Among the relief items being sent is drinking water, which is one of their absolute priorities. You will read the reports of their rivers having been converted into streams of steaming water, otherwise covered by ash, depending on where they are located. So water is their absolute number one priority. And of course, we have also sent disaster kits and, very importantly, 2 pallets of animal feed, antibiotic, IV fluid, bandages for animals, syringes, needles, and other agricultural-specific support based on contact that was also made by the Agricultural Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines with Minister Floyd Green, and their agreement that we should provide some support because their animal stock is under severe threat, those which have survived, and therefore we have provided this support. And those are all included. We were able to pull them together in time to make the sailing schedule of the HMBS Lawrence Major. Mr. President, our overseas missions are also involved in the effort. In Europe, our mission in Geneva through the Jamaican Association in Switzerland has launched an appeal which is well underway. In Brussels, the CARIFORUM group of ambassadors is engaging EU officials, including the DG for European Civil Protection and Humanitarian Aid Operations, to organize support. In North America, appeals for relief items and financial donations have been launched by our consulates in New York, Toronto, and Miami, in collaboration with other Caribbean consulates, and the Caribbean Consular Corps in Miami, of which we're also clearly a part, has already arranged to send a container of emergency relief items, including water and face masks, to the disaster zone, and this is complemented by containers of water also being sent by Food for the Poor from their Florida office as well. Through the Consulate General of New York, mobilization efforts have commenced using the mission's email database, traditional media engagements, and a targeted social media campaign within the tri-state area activated to encourage donations. And of course, our High Commission in Port of Spain, which is accredited to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and our honorary consul on the ground in that country have been closely monitoring the wider situation as well as that of the Jamaican community there. And needs of the community members, and they are largely well-assimilated persons who have been living there for years. And the numbers are close to 500 persons. Their needs are generally shared through an established social media group, which they have, And they're thus far, where they're not met by the state, they are met by fellow Jamaicans where they are in need and where we are able to assist. And we've only identified 2 Jamaicans who had been residing in the vicinity of the eruption, that is in the red zone, who were at risk and successfully evacuated. We have not been notified of any other Jamaicans who have been living in the red zone and been in need of evacuation. Mr. President, in this broad context, I want to use this opportunity to thank the Honourable Desmond McKenzie and the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development, I see it here as community again, ODPEM, the Honourable Floyd Green and the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, Food for the Poor, the Red Cross, Private Sector Organization of Jamaica and other members of the private sector, the Jamaica Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, the Jamaica Veterinary Medical Association, the Honorary Consul for St. Vincent and the Grenadines in Jamaica for securing supplies, which were all put together and have been set sail on the HMBS Lawrence Major. Of course, I want to also thank all concerned Jamaicans here and overseas and friends of the Caribbean who continue to actively mobilize support through their own means. And I am hoping again that we all have taken note of the donation account, because they are having issues with arrivals in the port. There are not only had they evacuated individuals to cruise ships, but they are receiving donations from UN and from other national partners, and it's actually causing a bit of a logistical issue at their port for delivery at this point in time. So one of the things that they are encouraging persons to do is to donate in cash, which allows them to procure as they need, what they need, when they need, and to manage the logistics of their arrangements better. So we are sending priority needs, which they have requested, but we are encouraging persons to donate cash when possible, because it eliminates the issue of transporting the goods as they are able to get them in the manner which is most efficient for them. And allow me to just repeat again, donation account for St. Vincent Relief, NCB Oxford Road Branch, account 212-387-304. So, Mr. President, I want to just assure the Jamaican public that the government of Jamaica is committed to helping, to providing assistance to the government and people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines during this most challenging time. And this we are doing as we send our thoughts and prayers continually to our Caribbean brothers and sisters. Mr. President, I just wish to turn briefly to the repatriation of Jamaican nationals from London on the 21st of this month, that is just on Wednesday. Members would be aware of the restrictions on travel from the United Kingdom due to the heightened risk of the spread of a new, more infectious variant of COVID-19, which had been confirmed in the UK. The restrictions were initially announced with immediate effect on December 21st, 2020 for 2 weeks, and have been continued since then on the advice of public officials. On the advice of public officials, they have been extended to April 30, 2021, as it now stands. Through the facilitation of the Jamaican High Commission in London, or Consular Affairs Department at headquarters here, the Ministries of National Security and Health, as well as their relevant agencies, and in particular, I want to emphasize how important the Ministry of National Security, our JCF, our JDF, our nurses and doctors have been to this process, and the technical team in the Ministry of Health as well, to work through the logistics for even as manageable, one would think, a number as have come home this time. Because it is with their help we have been able to bring home 27 nationals who ordinarily live in Jamaica and who were facing particular challenges in the UK. Mr. President, I want to thank as well British Airways, who facilitated their arrival on this special flight. And I have to especially thank my team in the Consular Department here in Kingston and the Jamaican High Commission in London. A lot of challenges arise in these circumstances, and including the anxieties and emotions of our nationals. And this team, really, it has been a long time that they have been having to dig deep, and they continue, notwithstanding, to give up their best in trying to make arrangements and to give support sensitively. Our team in London has also been lending various forms of support on the ground to persons who have needed to secure visa extensions, directing persons with special medical needs to where they could obtain assistance, and to locations where even some have been able to obtain their COVID-19 vaccinations, as well as COVID-19 tests in preparations for their flight home or elsewhere as they have sought to change their circumstances. So again, the return was made possible through controlled re-entry exemptions granted by the Ministry of National Security under the DRMA and, of course, subject to public health conditions. So subject to their strict adherence to public health protocols, including agreement to state quarantine. So, of course, while they would all prefer to be at their own homes, they feel better being here, closer to family and out of the circumstances in the UK. At the end of the quarantine period and subject to negative test results, they will rejoin their families. We note that an additional 66 persons who are awaiting to return are registered with us at the High Commission in London, and the High Commission assures me that they remain actively engaged with those nationals on the ground and will continue to update them on the lifting or expiration of travel restrictions. I want to just use this platform to, of course, reach out to encourage persons, rather, to reach out to the High Commission to ensure that they have official information and that they have facts, and, of course, to monitor their airlines' flight information once the travel restrictions have been listed. Again, I close on a note of reassurance, and this to the public of Jamaica, that the government continues to work in the interests of securing the public health of Jamaica as we fight the impacts of this pandemic together. Mr. President, I thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Scott Motley.
Mr. President, I firstly want to join with yourself and the leader of government business in extending my condolences to those who have lost people to COVID. You know, what has happened to us is that it has really gotten closer and closer. And so in the beginning, it was numbers and you were sympathetic and you felt, you know, a sense of dismay. But as this has progressed and we are now in excess of 700 people, we are losing friends, we are losing family, we are losing close acquaintances. The legal fraternity has lost quite a few of their members. And so it becomes so personal. I am pleased to see that the measures seem to be having some impact and our positivity rate has declined. In fact, I think yesterday there was only one death. And who would think that we would celebrate only one death? But when you have 13 in a day and the norm is 6, you are grateful for that. So I want Jamaica to understand that we here really extend our deepest condolences for what the tragedies which have now become a part of our life. I want to say that I appreciate the statement which the Minister has made about the tragedy in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, really impacting St. Vincent and in particular the red zone. When you think about the size of the population in St. Vincent, and you realize it's just a tad over 110,000 people, when you hear that 16,000 to 20,000 people are impacted, you can understand the severity of the situation. When you see that lava flowing, damaging houses, bringing down roofs, when you see persons attempting to scrape the ash from their homes, you can have a sense of what they are undergoing. It was interesting to hear the Minister of Water and Sewage explaining that you can't put a tarpaulin over the rivers, so there's very little you can do in terms of government to prevent the contamination of the water system. And it is a fact that no matter how much water you send, it simply is not enough. Our condolences and our sympathy goes out to people. We have colleagues there, so we have, everybody has a WhatsApp group now for everything. So we do have a WhatsApp group that keeps us apprised of events and what is taking place there. And every time you think that this has ended, another explosion occurs. Yesterday, we had one in St. Vincent. And the first thing that I did was to send my son, who lives in Barbados, a message. Any ash there now? Because the truth of it is that it is not only St. Vincent which has been impacted. Barbados, who responded immediately to assist St. Vincent, has been severely impacted. The ash has turned day to night there. It has damaged crops, it has impacted animals, and it has prevented the ordinary course of business for weeks. The airport has had to be closed, so that the economic tragedy is felt not only by St. Vincent. Yesterday, you could see in Jamaica that the skies were different, that the skies were in fact almost as though there was a little, it was darker, not clouds, you couldn't see the clouds. And when you hear that the impact will reach as far as India, that Spain is impacted, you know that we really are just all so interconnected, and what happens one place will impact everywhere. This is going to take a long time for them to recover. They say that it almost has the impact of the 1902 explosion. I'm not sure, Minister, whether there are any reports of people dying. I've not heard that. And when you think about the fact that 1,600 people lost their lives in the 1902 explosion, you just have to simply give God thanks for having saved these people from this. St. Vincent, I don't know how we are going to be able to help in the long term, but I do know that I hope that the entire world will come to their rescue and will assist in them returning to normalcy. You don't get back animals just like that, and you don't get back crops just like that. So it's a long haul. I can see where there has been a response, and Jamaica has responded by sending supplies. There are a number of accounts, Minister. Even the People's National Party has opened one so that people can send cash. United Way, different entities. I was totally unaware that ODPEM had one, and I thank you for bringing that to the attention of the country so that they can choose where they want to donate. The supplies are desperately needed, but I want to add one thing. You know, most people don't think of sanitary napkins. And I want to encourage as many people as possible to remember that there are young girls and women who are in shelters and who are in desperate need, and it is never too much for you to send. So in addition to all the care packages and the water and the sanitizers and all the things that are desperately needed, just remember to include that as well. So we look forward to seeing what will happen in the future and the sort of help which St. Vincent will need in the future. All hands must be joined in this attempt to get them to have a smooth recovery. I'm absolutely delighted, Minister, to know that some of our nationals are now returning. When I saw a headline in a newspaper saying that one family had £15,000 worth of debt because they had to pay hotel expenses, I was taken aback, because you make assumptions that, you always have a family member here or a friend here who you can catch with, and that Jamaicans will naturally open up their hearts, Jamaicans in the diaspora. Sometimes it's not possible. And this family has encountered this problem where £15,000 they have to find to pay hotel bills for their family. It's almost ironic that the flights from the UK had been stopped when the UK has achieved some kind of level of almost the herd immunity that the Prime Minister had hoped for at the outset is obviously now impacting. And what is happening to the United States and to other places is that it is a UK variant which is threatening their population. There is a touch of irony in that. But we are grateful that at least in the UK, it has settled down. Anywhere that it settles down is very important. And I am delighted to see that our nationals can now return home and that there are many who will be able to be repatriated in the future. Mr. President, we look forward to seeing here in Jamaica even more improvement. I look forward to the day when I will hear that the positivity rate is so minuscule that it does not need to be reported. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Scott Motley. Senator Brown.
Yeah, Minister, just a question arising from your speech, your statement. In the past, returning residents have been charged for being in quarantine. Could you say what's the situation with these? Are they being charged any costs during the process of quarantine by the government of Jamaica?
Thank you, Mr. President. Returning nationals have never been charged, and it had been contemplated because, of course, it is impossible for the government to continue to subsidize, but it was determined that because this number was a smaller number than is registered. As you know, we had more than 90, just over 90 persons who were hoping to be able to be returned. But the number that was determined to have the most critical needs, the government, from a humanitarian perspective, again extended our resources to cover the cost of quarantine for these 27 nationals that have returned. And no national has been charged for quarantine before. That had been contemplated, but it had not been implemented.
Thank you. And I assume the others who are going to come will face the same treatment. They won't be charged as well.
I'm not making that a commitment at this point. What I'm saying is that these nationals, that no national has been charged, and these nationals who had been identified as having the most critical needs were not charged. What we are hoping is that regular flights and managed quarantine, home quarantine, can be re-implemented by the time flights recommence. But I will simply say that I can't commit because it is not a decision for me. What I can say is that it has not been implemented and was not in respect of these persons.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Thank you, Minister. Bills brought from the Honourable House of Representatives.
To the Honourable, the following is a message from the Speaker of the House of Representatives. To the Honourable Senate, I have the honour to advise the Honourable Senate that on the 30th day of March 2021, the House of Representatives agreed to the Senate amendments to a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Disaster Risk Management Act in order to adequately implement and address measures to combat various calamitous events, including a pandemic, and for connected matters. I also have the honour to advise the Honourable Senate that on the 13th day of April 2021, the following bills were passed in the House of Representatives. A bill shortly entitled the Urban Renewal Tax Relief Amendment Act 2021 and a bill entitled the Tobacco Industry Regulation, Validation and Indemnity Repeal Act 2021. I further have the honour to advise the Honourable Senate that on the 21st day of April 2021, a bill shortly entitled the Justices of the Peace Amendment Act 2021 was passed in the House of Representatives. Signed, Marissa Dalrymple Philibert, MP, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Thank you very much. Petitions? Sorry.
Point of order, President. Yeah.
Mr. Brown. Senator Hill.
Mr. President, I signify my willingness to take charge of the bill shortly entitled the Urban Renewal Tax Relief Amendment Act 2021.
A bill shortly entitled the Urban Renewal Tax Relief Amendment Act 2021, read the first time.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice of second reading of the bill. Mr. President, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take second reading of the bill and to take it through all its concluding stages.
Senator Hill, turn off your microphone for me, please. Minister Campbell.
Mr. President, I signify my willingness to take charge of the bill shortly entitled Tobacco Industry Regulation, Validation and Indemnity Repeal Act 2021.
A bill shortly entitled the Tobacco Industry Regulation, Validation and Indemnity Repeal Act 2021, read the first time.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice of the second reading of the bill, and I further beg to give notice that at a stage later today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the second reading of the bill and to take it through all its concluding stages.
Thank you. Senator Brown, you had something?
Yeah.
Thanks. Judge, the Justice of the Peace legislation? You're not dealing with that? Sorry, Senator Brown.
Maybe, Chair, President, you should just take the point and make it, because it touches on that as well.
Let me just finish this and then I'll deal with it.
Mr. President, I signify my willingness to take charge of the Act to amend the Justices of the Peace Act and for connected matters.
A bill shortly entitled the Justices of the Peace Amendment Act 2021, read the first time.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice of second reading of the Act.
Thank you. Senator Brown.
It seems, Mr. President, that we've gotten to bills brought from the Honourable House of Representatives before going through announcement where they would be properly laid on the table. And so maybe we want to recommit announcement.
Yeah. I had, through the processes, I had neglected to call for announcements. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the Senate today are the following. Ministry Paper number 20 of 2021 entitled Cabinet Agenda Issues dated December 14, 2020. Ministry Paper number 21 of 2021 and annual report of the National Family Planning Board for the year 2018-2019. Ministry papers numbers 22, 23, 24, and 25 in respect of the law reform zones of special operations and special security and community development measures for the August Town Community Zone Social Intervention dated April 8, 2021, the Denham Town Community Zone Social Intervention dated April 8, 2021, the Greenwich Town Community Zone Social Intervention dated April 8, 2021, and the Mount Salem Community Zone Social Interventions dated for September 1, 2017 to April 8, 2021, respectively. Ministry paper number 26 of 2021, an annual report of the National Health Fund for the year 2019-2020, annual report of the Scientific Research Council for the year 2019-2020, annual report on audited financial statement of the Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority for the year 2018-2019, annual report of the Anti-Dumping and Subsidies Commission for the year 2015-2016, annual report on audited financial statement of the Kingston Container Terminal Services Limited for the year 2015-2016, annual report on audited financial statement of the National Road Operating and Constructing Company Limited for the year 2019-2020, Integrity Commission Special Investigation Report into the failure of Dr. Gitanjali Baruram, an employee of the Southeastern Regional Health Authority, SERA, to file statutory declarations with the Commission. The Integrity Commission Special Report on Investigation conducted into the registration of Intelcan, Technosoft Systems, INC, with National Contracts Commission, and the implementation of the contracts for the design and construction of air traffic control towers at the Norman Manley International Airport and the Sangster International Airport. Ministry of Finance and the Public Service audit report of the Auditor General's Department for the period April 2016 to March 2019. Ministry of Finance and the Public Service report on the appropriation accounts of the Auditor General's Department for the year 2013-2014. Ministry of Finance and the Public Service reports on the appropriation accounts of the Auditor General's Department for the years 2016-2017 and 2017-2018. The law reform zones of special operations, special security and community development measures with respect to the August Town Zone Extension of Period of Operation Number 2, Order 2021, the Greenwich Town Zone Extension of Period of Operation Number 2, Order 2021, the Denham Town Community Zone Extension of Period of Operation Number 2, Order 2021, and the Mount Salem Community and Environs in the Parish of St. James Zone Extension of Period Operation Number 2, Order 2021, respectively, and their resolutions. The Airport Economic Regulations, the Airport Economic Regulation Expansion Fund, Sangster International Airport Amendment Regulations 2021 and its resolution. The report of the Standing Orders Committee of the Senate regarding a proposed amendment to the Standing Order to allow members to join and participate in formal sittings of the Senate by virtual means. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Petitions, papers, reports from committees.
Mr. President, I beg to lay on the table of the Senate a copy of the report of the Standing Orders Committee of the Senate regarding a proposed amendment to the Standing Orders to allow members to join and participate in formal sittings of the Senate by virtual means.
Notices of motions given orally.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move the following motion. The Airports Economic Regulation Act, the Airports Economic Regulation Expansion Fund, Sangster International Airport Amendment Regulations 2021 Resolution. Whereas under Section 21, subsection 1 of the Airports Economic Regulation Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, the Minister may make regulations generally for giving effect to the provisions and purposes of the Act. And whereas under Section 21(1) of the Act, the Minister made the Airports Economic Regulation Expansion Fund, Sangster International Airport Amendment Regulations 2021, and whereas it is provided by Section 21(2) of the Act that regulations made under Section 21(1) shall be subject to affirmative resolution, and whereas it is desirable that the Airports Economic Regulation Expansion Fund, Sangster International Airport Amendment Regulations 2021 be affirmed, now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the Airports Economic Regulation Expansion Fund, Sangster International Airport Amendment Regulation 2021 Resolution. 2. The Airports Economic Regulation Expansion Fund, Sangster International Airport Amendment Regulations 2021, which were laid on the table of the Senate on the 23rd day of April 2021, are hereby affirmed.
Thank you. Senator Sinclair.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move the following motion. Be it resolved that the report of the Standing Orders Committee of the Senate regarding a proposed amendment to the Standing Orders to allow members to join and participate in formal sittings of the Senate by virtual means, which was laid on the table of the Senate on the 23rd day of April 2021, be approved.
Questions and answers to questions? Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the Senate. Motions for leave to introduce bills. The presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained. Public business. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, just to indicate that today it is intended to proceed first with the Urban Renewal Tax Relief Bill and then the Act in respect of the tobacco industry regulations, repeal and validation, and indemnity bill. And it is noted, Mr. President, that these bills were circulated last Friday and to members of this chamber. And I just want to thank members in advance for their cooperation in us tabling and taking these bills, which are uncontroversial and unlikely to have amendments proposed, given their nature and content. Mr. President, as you know and as members are aware, we have been taking matters in this manner from time to time, but more often since the onset of the pandemic, where the sole substantive item for an agenda would simply be the tabling of bills. We have sought to save the parliamentary time and movement, and in the interests of safety and efficiency, have circulated by email and then tabled and taken on the same day. And while I know that there are some persons which have a personal preference for the physical copy in their hand, we know that arrangements are easily made to obtain them, as we never preempt the actual production of the bill. And accordingly, what has been circulated is the bills as passed in the lower house, where they had no amendments. So, Mr. President, Senator Hill will be charged with piloting the Urban Renewal Bill, as you have heard, and Senator Campbell, the tobacco industry. And, Mr. President, these are the formal items listed on the agenda at this time.
Thank you, Minister.
Mr. President, we don't have any objection to the suggestion that even though it's just been tabling today, it goes ahead. But we don't want this to be accepted as the new standard. Because, you know, some senators, as you said, have a preference. For example, Senator Morris likes to have the physical thing in his hand to have a good look at, and he wants to maintain that right. So while it really is not an issue today, but we don't want it to become automatic. Thank you.
Mr. President, you know what occurs to me? In the same way the standing, and I hear the comment of Senator Bunting, and I appreciate the cooperation. It's very much appreciated. But I wondered whether in the same way the Senate has, the Standing Orders Committee has looked at arrangements for the holding of virtual sittings, whether we shouldn't be recognizing this as an option in these circumstances, because it is certainly Senator Morris receives the electronic copy, which is how his software processes. So it is actually the others of us who like the physical one who are more likely to have to make a slight adjustment to our method of operation. But it is not a difficulty to have someone print the bill or to print the bill ourselves until we make it to the sitting. So it's not that much of a disruption once we are vigilant about the time and ensuring that we try our best to ensure that there is no less than the week provided where it can be, where it is not driven by. But is that something that we should consider, Mr. President, as a chair?
Minister, as chairman of the Standing Orders Committee, I will certainly bring it to the attention of the members that it was a suggestion, and we will deliberate it with some expedition. It is something that the committee will look at. Senator Hill.
Mr. President, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to make second reading of a bill shortly entitled the Urban Renewal Tax Relief Amendment Act 2021, and to take it through all its concluding stages.
Sorry, Senator Hill, I was distracted. Could you just repeat what you're saying?
Mr. President, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take second reading of a bill shortly entitled the Urban Renewal Tax Relief Amendment Act 2021, and to take it through all its concluding stages.
Thank you, Minister. The members should have heard the question. Those in favor? Aye. Against? Senator Hill?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the Urban Renewal Tax Relief Act dates back to 1995 and represents the only geographically based tax incentive legislation in Jamaica. It survived the 2013 culling of incentive legislation, which was replaced by what was generally referred to as the Omnibus Tax Incentive Legislation, or formally, the Income Tax Fiscal Incentives Miscellaneous Provisions Act and the accompanying amendments to the Customs and the Stamp Duties Act. Mr. President, the Urban Renewal Tax Relief Act continues to be relevant because its principal objective is incentivizing private investors to aid and participate in the development of blighted areas and areas suffering from urban decay. To the extent that our cities and our communities suffer from this unsightly plague, this legislation continues to be used by policymakers to invite and encourage large, medium and small investors to take advantage of this government offer to invest in towns and cities, and in the process secure a significant tax benefit. In fact, Mr. President, we urge private investors to grasp the opportunities and tax benefits now. Don't wait, because they won't last forever. Nothing really does. Urban developers are able to use this tax incentive to rehabilitate old and decayed urban spaces and into new, bright, modern, and attractive built and open spaces, while at the same time create new jobs for many Jamaicans. Many of our city spaces, especially downtown Kingston, our capital city, do need a great deal of upgrading by private investors, and this legislation really gives much needed government incentive to invest quickly, we hope, make profits, yes, that's important, while employing local people, very important, and legally avoid substantial sums of tax for significant periods of time. The Act offers a bunch of incentives to the many parties who play a part in the development of these rundown town properties and spaces. To the investor, it offers tax relief, tax-free returns on approved bonds and loans issued from the funds from the bond issue, in addition to relief from transfer tax, stamp duty, and recording fees. To the approved developer who carries out improvement works in a special development area, it offers a generous income tax credit of a third, Mr. President, a full one-third of its capital expenditure for improvement works, transfers of land for development purpose free of tax, and where the developer rents the improved property during the incentive period, she or he is entitled to tax-free rental income from the property. Mr. President, these are extremely attractive incentives for people who invest in the downtown of Kingston and elsewhere. Good things have many fathers, including this. The significant, Mr. President, the significant benefits of the Act, which has been kept over various administrations, the significant benefit of the Act extends further to bestowing a double deduction for the amount of rent paid in arriving at their statutory income to tenants of the improved property during the incentive period. Everything is during that incentive period. We want everybody to note that incentive period is important. Do it now. Don't wait. The Act has been amended over the years to increase the incentives offered. For example, in 2010, when the tax credit was increased from 25% to 33.33%, the one-third I mentioned just now, and to address problems that have surfaced during the process of administering its provisions, as was done in 2015. The 2015 amendment, Mr. President, sought to make it easier for the administration of the Act by increasing the minister's power under the Act. The amendment, which is before the House for consideration, falls within the latter category of amendments and seeks to aid the ease of administration of the Act by clarifying the effect of certain provisions of the Act. Mr. President, the main issue which this bill seeks to clarify is the effect of the prescribed tax incentive period on the utilization of the tax incentives under the Act. Currently, the Act falls within the remit of two ministers, the Minister responsible for Finance and the Minister responsible for Urban Development. The procedure prescribed by the Act for the activation of the tax incentives with respect to an area involves the Minister responsible for urban renewal declaring an area suffering from urban blight or decay as a special development area under Section 3. This is followed, in practice they are done simultaneously, by an order from the Minister responsible for Finance prescribing the incentive period, which must be at least 10 years. The tax incentives operate in an area while these two orders subsist. While it is the Finance Minister who grants the various designations and approvals under the Act, the application process currently in place sees the application being first submitted to the Urban Development Corporation, the UDC as we know it. And of course, the UDC, through the expertise of its technical staff, assesses the actual or proposed capital expenditure submitted for approval by the applicant. Based on the information, Mr. President, supplied by the applicant during the application process, as well as site visits to the improvement works, the UDC's quantity surveyor makes a recommendation for the amount that qualifies as capital expenditure for the purposes of the Act. The recommendation goes to a committee which comprises representatives of the UDC, the Ministry of Finance, JAMPRO, as well as persons from the private sector, known as the Incentive Recommendation Committee, or the IRC. The IRC then examines the application, and when it is recommended, the recommendation for approval is communicated to Tax Administration Jamaica, whose role in the process is limited to the preparation of the relevant draft order and brief for submission of the IRC's recommendation to the Minister of Finance. When the Minister approves the application, the order is signed and duly published in the Jamaica Gazette. In practice, the orders designating a person as an approved developer usually speak to the order having effect for a period of 10 years, and applicants usually have the expectation of being granted 10 years. The time is important, Mr. President, because Section 13 lists certain restrictions on how the tax credit may be applied, including a yearly cap of 50% of the approved developer's tax liability. The credit may, however, be carried forward during the time that the approved developer order is in effect. In other words, you miss taking the credit 1 year because of whatever reason in making a profit, you can carry it forward to the next year within the period. No issue arises if the 10-year period given to an approved developer falls within an incentive period or if the incentive period is renewed for a further 10 years. However, the Act is silent on how the incentive period should be construed in relation to the date of application by the developer, which has given rise to ambiguity in the interpretation of the Act. This has resulted in situations where developers continue to enjoy the full package of incentives way beyond the end of the incentive period assigned to a special development area. This creates a distortion within the market as the approved developer, whose operating costs are low, would be competing for an extended period with rival businesses which do not and cannot enjoy those tax incentives. We need the negative distortion to come to an end. Mr. President, the issue came into full focus when shortly before the expiration of the incentive period in Spanish Town, which ran from March 1, 2008 to April 1, 2018, 2 applications were received in respect of works to be carried out in the Spanish Town Special Development Area. The Urban Renewal Tax Relief Regulations allow, Mr. President, for an application to be made by a person who intends to carry out the improvement works in a special development area. However, Section 13 of the Act requires that the works be carried out in a year of assessment during an incentive period. The applications were duly approved by the IRC and submitted to the TAJ for the preparation of the ministerial order under Section 4. The incentive period expired while the applications were going through the approval process. No problem arises from this where a new incentive period is declared for the special development area for another 10 years. However, Mr. President, the justification for the renewal of the incentives applying to the area was weak, having regard to the very low take-up of the facility, with only 2 companies applying over 10 years, apart from the 2 applications referred to earlier. A second weakness was the recent implementation of significant reduction and reform of stamp duty and transfer tax. Another was the abolition of the minimum business tax. Yet another, the elimination of the asset tax on non-financial institutions. Then consideration had to be given to the fact there was an increase in the GCT threshold and a reduction in the GCT rate. The employment tax credit, which was introduced in the omnibus legislation referred to earlier, had an effect on this process. And finally, the recent implementation of the corporate tax credit. That, Mr. President, is a substantial package of positive tax changes. And, Mr. President, we believe these changes should serve as adequate incentives and mitigate against the need to provide for a new tax incentive period for the Spanish Town Special Development Area at this time. Mr. President, it is the considered view of the Ministry of Finance that a more appropriate construction of the Act should result in the developer being given only the number of years between the approval of his application and the end of the incentive period for the area. Beyond the incentive period attached to the area, the tax shelter umbrella no longer exists, and the developer should face the exposure of being a normal taxpayer with the attendant liabilities. This position, Mr. President, will also ensure that persons who are interested in the development of blighted areas will declare, and we want this, declare their intentions at the commencement of the incentive period or soon thereafter, and not delay their decision until the end of the period, expecting then to have the whole period because you applied within before the end of the first period, but it was not extended formally. It will also help the government to gauge the effectiveness of the Act in relation to various areas and how the incentives can be more productively deployed to banish urban blight and decay, which is the objective. We want to make sure people come in early, invest early, get people employed, get the profits that you have to take. Everybody benefits that way. Mr. President, this leads me to the clause-by-clause discussion of the bill. An act to amend the Urban Renewal Tax Relief Act, being enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the Senate and House of Representatives of Jamaica, and by authority of same, as follows. 1.1. This Act may be cited as the Urban Renewal Tax Relief Amendment Act 2021 and shall be read and construed as one with the Urban Renewal Tax Relief Act, hereafter referred to as the Principal Act and all amendments thereto. Section 2 of the Principal Act is amended by A, deleting the definitions incentive period and special development area. B, inserting in the correct alphabetical sequence the following definitions. Appointed day means the day of the coming into operation of the Urban Renewal Tax Relief Amendment Act 2021. Effective date means date on which A, an area is declared an approved development area under Section 3.1 or such date as amended or varied under Section 3.3. B, an approved developer is declared under Section 4 or such date as amended or varied under Section 4A. Incentive period in relation to a special development area means the period for tax relief or tax exemption specified under Section 3A. Special development area means an area declared to be a special development area under Section 3. Section 3.1 of this Principal Act is amended. A, in subsection 1, by inserting next after 1 the word minister, the words with responsibility for urban development, and 2, the words purposes of, words in urban renewal under, and B, by inserting next after the subsection 2, therefore the following. 3, subject to Section 4B, where the minister with responsibility for urban development considers it necessary for the purposes of the Act, the minister with responsibility for urban development may, by order published in the Gazette, amend or vary the effective date or the area prescribed by an order made under subsection 1. Section 4, Mr. President, the Principal Act is amended by inserting inserting next after Section 3 the following. Where an order is made under Section 3, the minister may, by order, specify the period referred to as the incentive period during which the relief from income tax, stamp duty, transfer tax, registration, and recording fees under this Act shall apply in relation to a special development area. 2, an order made under Section 1 shall specify A, the special development area to which it relates, and B, subject to Section 3, the incentive period in relation to that special development area. 3, the incentive period to be specified under Section 2B shall be in a period of not less than 10 years commencing on the effective date on which the approved development was declared. Section 5, Section 4A of the Principal Act is amended A by deleting Section Roman numeral 1 and substituting thereafter the following. A new Roman numeral 1 on an application made by the approved developer and subject to Section 4B, where the minister considers it necessary for the purposes of the Act, Mr. President, the minister may, by notice, published in the Gazette, declare the application to be an approved organization and the notice period. Memorandum of Objects and Reasons. You really don't want to hear about 1995 again? I thought you loved that date. I thought you loved that date. But we need to just read the memorandum, just in case you forget it. The Urban Renewal Tax Act, Urban Renewal, Senator Brown, Tax Relief Act, the Act was enacted in 1995 to provide relief from the income tax, stamp duty, and transfer tax to persons who carry out development in areas suffering from blight or urban decay with a view to the improvement of the restoration of those areas, and B, incentives by way of tax relief to persons who purchase bonds issued for the funding of such development. Very important and very welcoming. We need people to act on it. The bill seeks to amend the Act to ensure that the period during which a person may benefit from tax relief under the Act is respect of improvement. Okay. Just lend me your paper. Okay, so, okay. The bill seeks to amend the Act to ensure that the period during which a person may benefit from tax relief is the object of this bill. Mr. President, I look forward to the debate and eventually support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Hill. Minister Senator Fraser Binns.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's a famous saying that you always say, but I will not. There's something you always say about the future and the present, but I shall leave it where it is today.
It's not always, so it goes still.
I'm leaving it where it is, Mr. President. Mr. President, yes, okay, thanks. Mr. President, I asked my colleague how long Senator Hill spoke for, and she's like, I'm not sure. And I said, is it 25 minutes? And she said, about 20. And I said, okay, I'm trying not to go beyond him. Senator Samuda left. Senator Samuda left the chamber, but I made a commitment to him some time ago not to repeat a particular thing that happened. And so I rise to make very brief comments on this bill, which seeks, which seeks to amend the Urban Renewal Tax Relief Act. Mr. President, yesterday the world paused to celebrate Earth Day, and under the theme Restoring the Earth, we saw, not just in Jamaica, but throughout the world, where the focus was on acts to restore the earth, whether it was a discussion about urbanization or planting trees or climate change, waste disposal. There is no doubt that there is a consciousness in humanity that we must do what we can to restore the earth. And I say that because today we are looking, Senator Hill, at the Urban Renewal Tax Relief Act. And in my mind, urban renewal, though this act speaks specifically to tax relief, urban renewal in my mind goes beyond the economics. And it has to look at the social. In fact, what is required is a holistic approach to urban renewal. And my very brief comments today really will not touch in great detail to the tax side of it, but just on urban renewal as we know it. And when we talk about urban renewal or urban areas, sadly, one generally focuses on the blighted areas in urban cities. We think of our inner city communities and the challenges that come with it. We think of crime and violence, we think of poverty, we think of lack of employment opportunities, some of which you would have referenced in your presentation, Minister Hill. But what is clear is that within urbanization, there is almost an unending cycle of poverty and decay in urban blight. And that has its spill-off. It impacts on people's ability to get jobs, because we do know that sometimes persons apply for employment and the addresses are looked at, and then just by this alone, you're almost disqualified. We also know that it affects your future, because the area you come from sometimes, most times, sadly, will influence the school you go to, the type of education you can get, and clearly your achievements. And therefore, as we look at urban renewal, I believe that the discussion in 2021, has to go beyond just the economics and look at how, as a country, we can renew our people. We can renew housing, we can improve employment, we can improve physical and social infrastructure, we can reduce crime, we can increase safety. These, in my mind, are some of the key tenets to which urban renewal should discuss and which we must pay attention. Mr. President, and as we continue the discussion for urban renewal, we must carve out what in my mind should be a strategy for urban renewal. And we know that there are different entities. Senator Braham, we know that there's a UDC and the role that it plays. We know that there are other NGOs, there are other government bodies that seek to do something about urban renewal. But the truth is that I am not convinced that as a country we have developed and we have coalesced around a map for real and inclusive urban renewal. And part of that has to do, His Worship, Your Worship, with the involvement of communities. Because, and you would know this, Senator, Mayor Delroy Williams, that the UN Goal 11 speaks about urban renewal to include communities, that communities have to be the heart of it, that it includes investment in public transport, it includes the creation of green public spaces and urban planning. So it is very participatory. Mr. President, we have, and I've spoken in this place before about it, and others have spoken in other fora about urban renewal, but within the context of housing. And I want to talk a little bit about it today, because as we look at urban renewal, we must take it outside of the corporate entity, Senator Hill. We look downtown, you referenced downtown in the presentation, we look downtown, and we have seen some of the things that have happened through urban renewal. We applaud the work of former Senator K.D. Knight and what he did when he headed the UDC. And I know someone asked what he did. You will be schooled in a little while. And I know that Senator Braham, as the, I'm not sure if you still are, but as the former chairman of UDC, continued the roadmap that was laid out by former Senator Knight and his team, which is commendable. But what I am not seeing, and what is not seen, is the mixture of elements for urban renewal. A lot of the focus really has been on the corporate development. So whether it is Senator Webley is not here, but I'm sure he would not be offended if I mention the entity to which he's associated. So whether it is what he's doing down there through his company, whether it is a relocation of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, there has been some effect, but it has been on a very macro level. And urban renewal must get to the micro level. So there has to be a focus on housing, on the mixture of what we call brownfield and greenfield housing. There has to be a concerted effort that is made not just to destroy or to take down or to demolish, but to rehabilitate, to renovate communities, to renovate housing, and to provide affordable housing solutions. Mr. President, and this is even more critical in 2021, because with the growing concern for food security, with all the effects of climate change, and Minister Samuda just left the chamber, but he has a passion for climate change. With the effect of climate change, there has been a growing tendency in Jamaica for the use of our most arable lands for housing. And this impacts directly on food security. The argument that has been proffered over a number of years is that we use what we have. And I can understand that. But I don't believe that we're using what we have efficiently and effectively. Because if we're using what we have, then what we need to do is to go back into some of these communities to look what we have and see how can we improve on what exists. So, you know, I worship in a particular community not far from here in Almond Town, Central Kingston. That has been my church for over, my family's church for over half a century. And I'm very familiar with that area. And, no, you're too kind. And I'm familiar with that. But if one really looks at a community, such as the Almond Town community in Central Kingston, then in my mind, that is a prime candidate for urban renewal. That is where you have planned communities, you have infrastructure, you have churches, you have schools, and they're within close proximity to different services. What has happened over the years is that the community has not been maintained. As a consequence, urban renewal, in my mind, ought to be going into communities such as the Almond Town community, such as communities in Central Kingston or in South St. Andrew, identify either lots, large parcels of lots that are uninhibited for one reason or another, or identify homes that can be renovated to lift the communities. That is, in my mind, is how urban renewal really takes place. It can't be focused solely on the big companies or on the developers. It has to be the community that plays a role in urban community. And I go further and I say to Senator Braham that there are several benefits to be had from that, but one of the benefits is that it is less costly because a community like Almond Town is a planned community. I mean, things would have changed over the years, but it is planned. So what is required is an upgrade of existing infrastructure. So that cost is there. And you rehabilitate housing. And I am proposing that as we contemplate how we deal with urban renewal, that there has to be a focus on this type of urban renewal. Mr. President, and as we contemplate a new way of urban renewal, then I believe that the government has a role to play in not just declaring an area a developmental area, Senator Hill, but in drafting plans, in integrally being involved in the type of development that should take place and how it should take place. Because if we don't do this, what is going to happen, which I can tell you, I have seen it, persons have come to me in a different capacity, that what is going to happen is a lot of these communities in our urban centers are going to be gentrified. That's what is going to happen. And they are going to be, the persons who presently live there are going to be displaced, and they cannot buy. Because those with the money will go in and they will invest and they will redevelop and they will sell at a price that regular people just can't afford. And I'm quite sure that the objective of any government is to ensure that everyone or most persons can own a piece of this rock. And so, Mr. President, as we consider that, I want to say something. This act was passed in 1995, over 25 years ago. My math is not the greatest, but over 25 years ago. And if we're honest with ourselves, Senator Hill and Senator Braham, and we do an assessment of what we have really achieved since the passage of this act over 25 years ago, then the truth is that we really not have achieved much. You spoke about you gave the example of St. Catherine or Spanish Down. 2 applicants during the 10-year period. Right? And I wondered to myself, have we really stopped to consider the reason for the minimal uptake, notwithstanding all the benefits? I also thought to myself last night, and when you said it this morning, I thought you were going where my thought was, that over the years, not just since 2016, but prior to 2016, there has been a steady decline in transfer tax and stamp duty, registration fee. And so the incentives that would have been provided for developers or companies to take up this offer really are not that great. I mean, they're good, but they're not that great, because transfer tax or stamp duty the percentage has reduced considerably. Corporate income tax, the abolition of minimum business tax, all of those things, and these are commendable. But the fact is that these are some of the things that would spur an investor. But because of how things have evolved for the better in that regard, the incentive is not there. And I wondered, Minister, if in the new dispensation we can think outside of the box. And I have a proposal for you in that regard. I have a client in my other sphere, and she bought a property downtown, $7 million. Of course, she's a purchaser, so she had to pay her $2,500 for stamp duty. She had to pay a 0.25% for registration fee. The vendor clearly would have dealt with the transfer tax. But having spent that $7 million to purchase at home in the downtown area, she is spending another maybe 1.5 to renovate and to rehabilitate and to make it habitable. And I wondered if in our contemplation, how can we allow this individual to benefit under this act? Because she's not a developer, she's not a company, but she is an investor. She is an individual who invested in purchasing a home for her and her family. Why should she not benefit? Maybe she can benefit, but my reading of it is she does, on the face of it, she can't benefit readily. And I'm proposing that the Tax Relief Act must be so reworked and remodeled so that individuals like my client can benefit one way or another. And that's the proposal that I am making, Mr. President. And as we continue talking about urban renewal, and I'm cognizant of the time, we have to also consider, Senator Scott Martin said we have to be creative. We have to be creative. One of the things that we have to do is to really focus, Your Worship, on mixed use, mixed development. There is no harm in somebody having, and I see him shaking his head. There is no harm, Your Worship, in mixed use, and mixed use comes in different form. It could be a hybrid where you have commercial running beside residential. It could be a commercial at the bottom and residential at the top, because it happens. And as we contemplate, and as we contemplate urban renewal, why do we not contemplate stuff like that? Why do we not look at our planning laws? Why do we not? I'm very happy about that. And I stand prepared to work alongside you and Senator Hill to make it a reality. Because one of the things that we have to do is to look at our planning laws. Because you do know, Your Worship, that areas are zoned. So you have a commercial area, you have a residential area, you have things that can happen. We have to change that. It's just a reality. We're going to have to change it. And so there is going to be a need for us to look at our planning laws. But I want to put in a quick plug, because though I am for the review and modernization of planning laws, we have to also ensure that the planning laws are enforced. One of the challenges we face is that there seems to be almost like a free thing, free for all, right? I know you're trying, but the reality is it's almost like a free for all. We're going to have to put some real strength and effort and resources into enforcing these planning laws. Otherwise, the whole operation, the whole scheme will be overwhelmed, and we're going to get back to where we're coming from, which is the creation of blighted communities. Urban renewal will not take place or will not achieve its objectives unless we put people at the heart and at the center of it. So the community becomes important. I mentioned earlier that, to my certain knowledge, and I stand to be corrected, the majority of those who have taken up the opportunity under the Act are corporate entities. But I also know that a significant number of the persons who are, a significant number of these entities have remodeled or renovated or recreated the space for corporate purposes. And I also know, and this is a fact because I did check it out, that a number of these entities come with their own workers. So you go into a community downtown, for example, and I'm using downtown because we're there. You go into a community downtown to do a work to set up an entity, but you're not using the persons who work in that community. So a person on a particular lane passes by every day and sees an infrastructure going up. They see people coming there and work. They have no idea what's going on. So they are almost like aliens to the development, to the process, to the thrust for urban renewal. And because of that, there is not a sense of ownership. Nobody is anybody watchman or security guard. Now, the undisputed fact is that a part of blighted community is crime and violence. And the undisputed fact is that when you have communities rallying around themselves and rallying around that which is important to them, then crime and violence reduces substantially. I'm therefore proposing that a part of the urban renewal should be that for every development that takes place, that a particular percentage of the employees should come from the local community. And you might say, but Sophie, we can't control what private sector do. I said, that is correct, but you are the government, you are setting the rules, so let's do it. And it is not difficult to do. We know that within the public sector, for example, if there's a vacancy, you apply internally before you go outside. It happens in the private sector too. We also know that with international bodies, there's a percentage of nationals. So if they can only employ X percentage of Jamaicans, X percentage of Americans, X percentage of Canadians. We know it happens. I don't believe that there is anything to prevent us in the new policy for urban renewal to put that as a requirement, that a certain percentage of the local workers should come from certain percentage of the workers should come from the community. And this has a lot of benefit. One, it creates employment locally. Two, it brings about a sense of community ownership. And it also provides security. People feel this is theirs, and I may have mentioned before when I worked at the Social Development Commission as a community development officer, we went into a community and we built something for them. And they never used it. And when you ask, how come, they say, but we never want this, we never tell this what we want. But the moment you engage the community, they feel like they're stakeholders. Senator Rodriguez, from experience, you would know that it is so. They feel like stakeholders. They feel they have a vested interest and they're going to want to protect it. So if a development is taking place and 5% of the persons in the community know that they're getting a job, they're going to ensure that that development takes place because it means that their bread and butter is covered. So there are benefits to be derived, Senator Braham. And I am recommending that as we take a non-traditional and a creative approach to urban renewal, that we look at this. And quickly, Mr. President, before I wrap up, green spaces. Your Worship, you know that we are agreed, we have spoken about this so many times, the importance of green spaces in communities, in development. There cannot be any development without proper green space. And I know we have the Building Act, and we need to enforce it, but there must be green spaces. And, you know, apart from the environmental positive that it brings about in terms of having the trees and the relationship between, you know, oxygen and carbon dioxide and reducing of emissions, the fact is that what it does as well, it has a direct psychological, Senator Longmore is not in here, it has a psychological effect. Studies show that in communities where you have green spaces and parks, that persons are less stressed, there's less tension, there's more community bonding because people have somewhere which they can rally. I remember in the early, what's that, Senator Braham? You agree? I know you agree. And you do have marriages, of course, but you know, you and I support. But, you know, seriously though, at the beginning of the COVID crisis last year, when we had the curfew, I do recall a lady being interviewed from one of our communities, and she spoke about the fact that it is so very difficult for her. And if I recall, it was one of what we call one of those tenement settings. It's difficult for her to be enclosed in her house, and there's nowhere to go, which is why she was on the road. And if we think about it, when we have green spaces, we have community parks, we have development parks, then this is something that people can go, they can relax, children can have fun in a safe and environmentally friendly areas. We need to have walkable communities, Your Worship. We need to have areas where it's only bicycle or special vehicles can go there. I mean, I won't even go into the effect it has on the environment in terms of carbon emission. But it can work, it has worked. In England, we know, Senator Braham, we know it works because there are some places in central London that you can't drive. It is a no-drive area, you have to walk there. And if you dare to drive, the payment that, I mean, the amount of money you have to pay. It's your place. Brixton is your place. Okay. Well, I know Senator Hill, it's all about central London for him, you know, when you go down on Westminster. And that is where he hangs out in his free time, okay? but oh, well, as I said, that is your hanging out spot. But because you hang out there ever so often, then you know that what I'm saying is true, and you know it can work. And that is one way in which they have managed to preserve their urban centers. And I am recommending that that is something that we should do. So urban renewal, in wrapping up, really is not just so much about the economic benefits or the corporate entity engagement. It does have a significant role to play, and what we're doing here today, Senator Hill, is important, and I support it wholeheartedly. But I'm saying that from the experience we've had locally and from the experience of other countries, we know that urban renewal must, in 2021, go beyond what we have always done locally. We have to look at rainwater harvesting, building envelope concepts. We have to look at renewable energy. And I mentioned green spaces, and I know Senator Morris would not forgive me if I don't say that urban renewal must also consider the disabled, you know, ramps and having full and uninhibited access. Mr. President, the fact is that while we improve communities through the building of corporate entities, we must, as part of urban renewal, focus on the quality of lives of residents in urban communities. We have to embrace social and sustainable development. We have to look at land use planning, urban design, greenery, local culture, heritage preservation, and harbor beautification. In closing, Mr. President, I want to say that for us, and I do hope, Senator Hill, that if we don't yet have it, that we will move quickly to develop a policy that gives support to the Tax Relief Act, or if we do have one, that we modernize it, because it does have, urban renewal does have an economic and a social dimension, and the benefits is not just a source of economic production, but is also a basis of social relationships and cultural values, a source of pride, prestige, and often power. And if we accept that, Mr. President, then I believe that Jamaica will well be on its way to achieving its objective of Vision 2030, which is to make Jamaica the choice of place to live, to work, raise families, and to do business. Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Hill, I try to keep it within your time.
Thank you, Senator Fraser-Bin. Senator Brown.
Mr. President, I am going to ask...
And this would be the first time that Senator Brown is addressing us since his recovery.
I was about to say I was going to ask your permission just to say something briefly about that. Thank you. But particularly, Mr. President, to thank my colleagues.
Yes, you have the permission to do so.
Thank you very much. To thank my colleagues and staff of the Parliament for their well wishes and prayers while I was sick. On reflection, I do feel very special that it appears that I have a lot of love. And yes, indeed. Yes, and I'm not going to tell you how it was expressed or shown. But those of you who sent WhatsApp while I was sick and didn't get any response, it is probably because I didn't understand at the time what I was reading. But suffice it to say is that I can say that COVID, of course, is not a nice thing. It can, in fact, generate great suffering. And we know that it also generates some deaths as well. And I give God thanks for surviving, even when there was doubts as to whether I would. And so I can only urge my colleagues and the staff to do all you can to avoid the disease. It is better. I once spoke to a policeman just recently, and he said to me, he just came up to me and said, "You would take the joke?" And I was a little, initially, I was a little perplexed as what he was talking about. Then I realized that he was talking about COVID. And I also felt that he thought I was looking medical, you know, because I didn't really know the gentleman. And I was trying to, he was skeptical. And he wasn't even wearing a mask at the time when he was asking me about it. And I was trying to persuade him that it's not a bad idea since he has to be with the public and so on and so forth. But nonetheless, he did put on his mask. And I go to places and nowadays I see security guards. I stop and I say to them, "What happened to your mask?" That type of thing, and have a conversation with them. They tend to soften up when I quickly tell them that I'm a survivor, Mr. President. So I want to urge my colleagues and your families and the staff to do all you can, because you have no idea how it will treat with you if it should catch up with you. And so I want to start by asking you and urging you and preaching to you on that aspect, Mr. President, and that God will take us through this particular period of our lives without too much more damage. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I don't, Mr. President, say much about the UDC because there is a minister for the UDC, and he speaks on its behalf. And so there are times when my colleague, Senator Lambert Brown and so on, make references to it, and I really don't say anything. Neither do I try to correct him or anything like that. But it is useful today, Mr. President, to acknowledge the work of the Urban Development Corporation and the staff, particularly, over the years. And of course, Mr. President, it includes the several boards over many years. But in particular, for this particular aspect of this urban renewal tax arrangement, thank you very much, because they played a role as a secretariat when an investor or a developer has a plan to carry out a development in one of the designated areas. They submit their paperwork, sometimes in boxes, and the staff spend their time analyzing and eventually making their recommendation. And indeed, before they even submit, they would meet and provide guidance so that the chances of success would and will be increased. I think that their work has been considerable, and I know that I want to tell the public that they really do deserve commendation for what they have done in this regard over many years. This program, Mr. President, was designed to speed up the development of certain blighted areas, Mr. President. And it has helped because, as the minister points out, since this legislation in Kingston, there have been 31 successful applications, and indeed over $8 billion, I think, have been invested. And unfortunately, in the other areas, the take-up has been less, much less. Spanish Town, probably we had 3 applicants and only 2 who were really successful under the legislation. Having regard to the nature of the need, that's not enough. And there's no doubt about it. I thought before I was the chairman of UDC that I knew downtown well. But since then, I have come to learn what I have christened the belly of Kingston. And I've had the opportunity to come downtown in the night, not only to go on the waterfront at a certain restaurant facility that Senator Brown, no doubt, will quickly remind me started under his watch. But that facility is there, and we are grateful for it. But just to go up into the lanes and some of the other places that you think were business places, but in fact were former business places converted into residential facilities. The take-up has not been good, and I've been thinking about it. How do I, and I mean, Senator Fraser-Binns, I'm not going to particularly try to respond to you. I'll leave that to the minister, who is better equipped. But the question is, how do I get the development of the streets, let's say Hanover Street, to be done in a timely manner? It was assumed that the owners of the properties would take up this tax facility, which is very generous, and so forth. In the survey that has been done among some persons, one gentleman, when I asked him why he didn't use the facility to renovate his building in a particular place, and it looked bad. The building looked bad. He was operating a business in it, and he was an established businessman, so to speak. And he looked at me and looked around and said, "Boss, me not pay tax, me not pay tax." So I said, "Well, so what?" Well, he said, "Well, me did check the UDC, and me have to pay tax. And if me not pay tax and get me certificate, that me tax art in order. But them say me can't get it." That's what he said. So him that like take it, but him not pay tax. But him doing well, so I engaged him in conversation. I said, the business look well, why you don't pay tax? He didn't take me on that. But it did strike me that that could be part of the reason, but I am not quite sure why the business persons downtown have not taken up this facility with greater use, especially buildings that are already in use and in need of renovation. But then there are buildings that the owners have abandoned because of certain social activities over the years, and therefore they cannot be located. There are businesses that have been recently acquired by individuals for the purpose of land banking. Interestingly, that has been quietly going on, say, in downtown, Mr. President, which may be a good or bad thing. It's just that they're not doing anything with the building, the land, they just have them. And it does bring to my attention that if we really intend to get the belly of Kingston, and I'm talking about Kingston in particular, moving and improving, we really would not be able to simply rely on the owners, our past owners, our present occupiers. Regrettably, much of the land will have to be acquired by government or taken over by government, and in the end it will going to require some kind of special funding for those who have land or buildings that needs renovation. I think that if we were able, and I'm not denying the need for the human element, and I agree with my friend Senator Binns about the fact that human beings must be the center. And indeed, downtown Kingston, because you have so many residents who are living in former commercial facilities, will no doubt benefit from some kind of housing program. But I think that if we could get these buildings renovated in their old style, an attempt was done on Duke Street to an extent, it would really make Kingston even more beautiful than it is. And there's no doubt that the buildings cannot be renovated unless arrangements are made for the residents who have informally occupied many of them. But it appears to me that at the end of the day, Minister Hill will have to come, and the Minister of Finance, when we are in a financial position to do so, and begin to allow the UDC to acquire some of the properties for the purposes of carrying out this renewal that is necessary downtown and in other similar areas, and to raise funding so that persons can access it. But it appears that it will have to be driven by government. I'm so sorry to say so, because we live in a time where business people ought to take up the cudgels, but they don't often do it. And I think that if we need to have it done much quicker, then it has to be greater incentives have to be provided, but government may well have to acquire the lands and then deal with it from there. So I support the bill, and I put that on the table. It's not the best time to talk about finding money to spend because of the shortage of money, having regard to the condition. But I'm hoping that as we improve and we grow stronger and we recover, that we will be able to consider that in the near future. Ms. Senator Binns spoke about Almond Town. And I am happy to say that Almond Town is one of those areas that have received significant planning attention in recent times. And first of all, I must also point out, and I think Senator Hill is leaving, but before he leaves, just to say that significant work is being done for sewage infrastructure downtown, even now as we speak. The sewage works that are being carried on by the Water Commission and others, which will eventually facilitate the renewal and development of this area. I wanted to say it before Senator Hill goes, so that when he comes, he can confirm it that is so, because I think he knows it that is so. And that's significant work that is being undertaken by the government that will ensure that downtown Kingston will have the foundation upon which to continue its further renewal. But in relation to Almond Town, the government did announce, Mr. President, and the government Oval project. And significant work and study has been done on that, Mr. President, including community engagement. Mr. President, I had the opportunity to go to town hall meetings. Some were on the face of it very hostile, Mr. President, but when I met with the people, you know, they were always very welcoming and loving to me. But we have had community engagement. We have had the SDC, Mr. President, and when this project comes on stream, it is going to be and result, Mr. President, in significant improvement for the lives of the people of Almond Town and that immediate area around Heroes Park. I just say that, Mr. President, because the UDC is responsible as the project managers, not for the money, but for the getting the planning work done, and when it starts to manage it, Mr. President. And I mention not for the money for obvious reasons. But we have done significant work, Mr. President. And indeed, in addition to that, the Parliament, as the Prime Minister announced, is, well, now that has been a miracle in the sense of how quickly the agencies of government have gotten together to approve this work. Significant work. Competition was held, Mr. President, as you know. Then the winning architectural team, Mr. President, identified. They have put a team of Jamaicans together, both in Jamaica and outside of Jamaica. And they have worked and produced, well, I'm not an architect. I can't describe it in architectural terms. But then when you look at it and it is explained to you, and when you see it virtually, Mr. President, it's a thing of beauty. It's not only going to facilitate better parliamentary interaction, but it is going to be a landmark in this city, Mr. President. I had the privilege of growing up partially in two places, one in the country in the parish of Westmoreland called Haddo, and the other is on Waltham Park Road. But I do recall as a child, my aunt would take me to town with her in the middle of the week, sometimes on a weekend, whether it's going to Coronation Market, Princess Street. She had always an idea where these little dress shops were, and she would go there and buy all sorts of trinkets in this lane and so on and so forth. She just knew the place and so on. And one of the things she would do is, as she dragged me along, is to point out landmarks that she considered landmarks. Look, boy, look up there, so. That is where so and so and so. In the language that she spoke, because we did not speak English when I was growing up. So for those of you who would like to test me in another language, I do that too. Yes. I was not always cooperative. But the point is, landmarks. And I see that when the Parliament is constructed and Government Oval is done, but either of them, when boys and girls come in to Kingston, it will going to be a place where they're going to stop and admire. And they are going to tell people about it. They are going to say, now this is our Parliament building. And Mr. President, it is going to be a thing that Jamaicans are proud of. That too, Mr. President, is a matter that the Urban Development Corporation has been spearheading, and I want to acknowledge their work and effort. And the other agencies who have gotten together to approve the plans and give the municipal corporation, NEPA, and so on, Mr. President, which put us in a place we are now going through, is it PIMSEC? PIMSEC, for their final approval. After that, Mr. President, it is going to be now a matter of procurement, so that hopefully, with the resources that Senator Hill will locate, come the next financial year, as the Prime Minister announced, grounds will be broken. And I want to say, Mr. President, with a bit of pride, that this Urban Development Corporation, when ground is broken on its behalf, usually work commence shortly thereafter. And I think you should give us a clap for that, Mr. President. Thank you. Mr. President, the question again of parks and so forth. And that is an area, Mr. President, that the Urban Development Corporation has taken careful note of and has involved itself greatly, Mr. President, starting in the recent development of Harmony Park in Montego Bay. If it wasn't for COVID, it would have been open to the public, but it is largely finished. Those of you, Senator Allen, I hope you have passed by to have a look. But if you haven't, I want to make an arrangement for you to get a tour. Well, you don't live in Montego Bay. But it is a beautiful thing, Mr. President. It is 16 acres of land. I know that when it was proposed that there were those who thought it was too much. And Senator Brown might be aware of that, and that the land could well be used for other things. Some of it anyhow. But we have stuck to it. It will be a free park, Mr. President, with amenities, and I suspect that some of us will travel to Kingston and spend time there. But you'll recall, Mr. President, the Prime Minister announcing that we are going to develop parks, and that the next one to be developed is the much-announced park in Portmore. Land, UDC land has been designated. Attempts have been made in the past, and it has not worked. But, and I know when it is done, because we are building a track record now that whatever we say we are going to do, we do. And I know, and even though it has been announced by others in the past, and I know that when it is done, it will be mentioned that it was conceptualized by other persons. But nevertheless, nevertheless, Mr. President, in short order, the government, no doubt, will have the opportunity to break ground and open another park, this time in Portmore. And we have a number of parks that we are to renovate. The Prime Minister mentioned the walkway. I call it a walkway. There's a better name for it, which is going to lead us all the way from downtown along. The lands have been acquired and are available through right to the airport. What is it called? A boardwalk. Thank you. Well, yes, Senator Brown will be permitted there, of course. But these are some of the facilities, and when the government announced the other plans, it's not for me now to make those announcements, because I'm only dealing with what has been announced already. When they make the further announcements as to the other facilities in towns and in parishes across the country, so that, and you know, Mr. President, I must tell you, as I return to Harmony Park, I remember when I first became the chairman of the Urban Development Corporation, I went to Montego Bay to meet the Montego Bay stakeholders. And they treated me very hostilely, initially anyhow, because they said, well, you come from UDC again? How much things you promised we? I'm not telling you who promised. But to be fair, the UDC has done a lot in that area. But they said that there were things that we promised, and we never do it, and they don't believe we're going to do it. So I said, well, of all the things that we have promised, if you could just choose one, which would you choose? And almost unanimously they said, we will choose the park, but we don't believe you're going to do it. Nevertheless, Mr. President, I went from that meeting to look at this park because I don't know Montego Bay. I didn't have the privilege. Though I grew up partially in Westmoreland, I had no opportunity much to go to Montego Bay. So I went to look at this place, and I thought it was in great use at the time, although undeveloped. People were using it, sitting in there, walking, and so on, and so forth. It was clear, Mr. President, that if it was developed, it would bring great advantage to that parish and even to Western Jamaica, so that we understand the value of parks, Mr. President. Indeed, when the Parliament is built, National Heroes Park will be rehabilitated, Mr. President. This is an announcement the government has already made. The architectural team have with them landscape architects, and when you see the plans and the trees, all local, with a small percentage of Caribbean plants, but all local plants otherwise, when the plants that are suitable for downtown Kingston, plants that are suitable for the brackish water that the wells in that park generates, and they are likely to be able to survive the harsh condition, Mr. President. When you see the layout, Mr. President, I assure you that when Senator Fraser Binns goes to church on a Sunday, she will have to stop and sit over there and have an ice cream. Indeed. Indeed. You may have to take your Bible study over there. Right? But I'm just saying, Mr. President, it's not that the government, certainly in terms of the UDC, has not instructed and facilitated certain things needed to assist urban development, Mr. President. If you're talking about parks, the government, certainly through the UDC, has been doing it, and through other agencies. If you talk about tree planting, Mr. President, we have been participating in tree planting in an aggressive way throughout the country, Mr. President. And indeed, if you're talking about planning and organizing communities throughout the country, the government as a whole has been doing it, but certainly the UDC has been doing it. So, Mr. President, I am very happy that the UDC has been able to contribute to the implementation of the Act as it was passed in 1995, and indeed will continue to do so even when it is amended, and we trust that greater use will be made of it, and as we look to develop downtown Kingston in a greater thing of beauty. I thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Ransford, thank you very much. Senator Allen.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. You know, prior to being in this chamber, and I don't tend to say much, I tend to, and when I do, I try to be brief.
Senator Allen,
yes?
One moment,
Sure.
please. Leader.
Mr. President, the time being almost 1:20, I ask that the Senate be allowed to sit beyond 1:30 to complete the business of the day.
Thank you, Madam. The question is that the time being 1:20, somewhere the Senate be allowed to sit beyond 1:20 to complete the business of the day. Those in favor? Against? Senator Allen, all yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. So like I was saying, a few days or maybe a week or so after I was appointed to the Senate, I met with a former Senator, former Senator Noel Slowly, and he gave me some advice that it's not always necessary to speak, but if and when you do, try your best to be brief and relevant. So it is my hope that my contribution today will in fact be brief and relevant as I rise in support of this urban renewal tax relief bill. Thank you. I will today just say a few words in relation to this with this bill in relation to from the context or within the context of tourism. When I think of places like Charleston, South Carolina, Oxford in England, or New Orleans, a place I've wanted to visit but have not yet, I think of how my city of Montego Bay could be and should be in terms of having people live and work and tourists visit and commingling with great ease. Seemingly, or not seemingly, but in a sustainable way, grow and develop a city. That's a dream I have of Montego Bay. And really, that's sort of the view I have of other cities or town centers, urban centers across Jamaica. Much of our discussions with regard to urban renewal tend to focus on Kingston, and we've had a lot of references to Kingston. And in the case of the example given by the minister earlier, to Spanish Town. Montego Bay, which is the belly, just like Kingston, Senator Braham, is the belly. The downtown is the belly of Kingston. Montego Bay has its own belly, and I'm sure Senator Sinclair, as a Montegonian, would see where I'm coming from. As a Montegonian, like I said, I live there. And if I'm fortunate enough to have another 30 years or so of active life, I would still be pretty young, but let's say I have another 30 years or so, I'm concerned about the kind of Montego Bay that I would see based on where it was and where it is today. And there have been many plans. I don't think we're short on plans. Greater Montego Bay redevelopment plan, many plans, as Senator Braham mentioned, in terms of within the UDC. It's now a matter of how do we, many are plans that, if implemented, we would all be quite satisfied with how our towns and cities are developing. A lot of development has taken place in Montego Bay. In the east, you have Rose Hall with lots of new buildings and hotels and other shopping centers. And to the west with Fairview. I beg your pardon? Well. You know, continue. I will continue.
Yeah, do not let Senator Sinclair distract you.
It's my good friend, you know. It's my good friend.
Yes. When you go back to Montego.
It's my good friend. He almost saved me this morning. Anyway, so there have been a lot of developments in the Fairview area. The concern, however, that I have is that the heart of Montego Bay, the town of Montego Bay, the city of Montego Bay, is on the verge of being neglected because there's been development east and west and creating new town centers. We have the Civic Center, which was refurbished and in use, the Civic Center, which is in the heart of the town in Sam Sharp Square. There's the Dome, there's St. James Street, Market Street, all these streets that even on North Lane, which is the equivalent of Printer Street that Senator Braham just spoke of, and its own design district. And the potential that it could be for a greater design district is in the Montego Bay. And we should not allow these areas to be neglected and have further decay and ruin. And as such, the incentives that we would want to extend to businesses from the economic point of view for them to invest in not just new, but also renovating old and equipping them to become new and modern facilities for use locally, to be used both by locals and foreigners. We must focus our emphasis or efforts on ensuring that we maintain what we have and not lose just for the sake of new development outside of what already exists. The fact is, places like Holiday Village that I grew up knowing just across the street from Holiday Inn Hotel, a place that was a very vibrant facility. My parents had a restaurant in there. A vibrant area is now basically decayed. We should seek to incentivize and cause for people to want to invest in a place like this because it enhances the work and the business of tourism that is on that stretch. And it would be good to bring back those days when Holiday Village was that vibrant facility that most of us know. So like I said, urban renewal doesn't just mean replacing old with new. It is also restoring the old and making it practical for today and tomorrow. If we are to do our future any justice, there are some urgent decisions that must be made in terms of how we develop and where we place emphasis with this development. A country's success is dependent on the collaborative, coordinated effort, no different than the assembly, for example, of a motor vehicle, moving parts working in concert with one objective, to have the completed vehicle or the completed city we wish to see. Earlier, mention was made of owners, individual owners, some of whom have left or allowed for their property to be in decay, to be going to ruin. And how do we then ensure that we make it attractive enough or not as intimidating for them to want to be part of the process to ensure that they are part of the solution to renovating and rebuilding and renewing a city? It means that local authorities, urban planners, the private sector, individual owners, civil society must continue to work together to define what we want. The efforts in urban renewal in Kingston must be applauded, and we've spoken about it already. There's been a lot of improvements that resulted in companies having their base here in downtown Kingston. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we see that movement into the building is taking place soon. It's on the verge. Expansion of places or companies like Grace Kennedy, and we must applaud them. The restaurant facilities that are on the waterfront that was mentioned before, I enjoy that. I want to see that in Montego Bay. I want to see the same level of interest and drive to renovate downtown Montego Bay as we see in Kingston, see it in Falmouth. The fact is, places like Falmouth, we know the history of Falmouth, the Georgian history in Falmouth. Yes, there have been a few who have done work, but there's more that needs to be done in order to take it to the level of the Charlestons and the St. Augustines and other places that everybody visits as tourists. You know, it's hard to stand here as a Montegonian and not speak of the fact that if we are not careful, we will have persons who, because they have the financial power at this time, they will purchase as they have been purchasing and might not have the same level of interest in preserving certain elements that some of us would have. And therefore, I encourage whatever we can do in this space to cause for more local investments in towns and cities across the country so that we preserve, and in another 30 years, there can be the person who stands in my place can speak of their Montego Bay or their Falmouth or their wherever, Lucy, as I would like to speak of my Montego Bay. I wish to use, therefore, the opportunity to call on the UDC, and we know we already have the support, to have a focused development plan for Montego Bay, street by street. Creek Street, Market Street, Church Street, Love Lane, North Lane, call it whatever. Because I'm a Mobay girl, man. From Barracks Road to Montego Bay High. So I believe that sometimes when we look at the whole, it is so big and almost seemingly impossible to take on. If we were to take this on street by street, I believe that we will see the small steps and feel good about and cause for others to see the effort. So let us not look and try to do everything one time. Mr. President, they say that to reach your destination, you at least have to make the first small steps. And I think street by street, we can get there. The park, you know, okay.
Do not allow Senator Braham to take it off track.
You see, he's such a lovely man, you know. Senator Braham, just for your knowledge, and Senator Sinclair knows this, I see the park every day. My office that I operate from is on 4th Street, another street that requires some renovation. Urban Development has its office on 4th Street, and incentivizing local investors, myself included, to ensure that we add value to. So yes, I see the park. I look forward to the gates opening. The view is amazing.
I don't believe it. Mr. President.
I said the view. I said the view. The view.
Senator Braham.
So I wish to call on the UDC, whose support I know we already have with the leadership in the chairman, to have focused development. Yeah, giving him play. I'm giving him plays.
He's a good one.
Yeah, he's one of the good ones. To, again, like I said, street by street, to attack this business of urban renewal, ensuring that there is the mix of business, residential, and entertainment, so that we can live cohesively in one community. The approach will be to enhance the tourism product. This will lead to the enhancement of the tourism product in Montego Bay, and it will be for the development of other forms of attractions that would allow visitors to not only enjoy or have one type of experience, but to have a full and varied type of experience, and to ensure that they appreciate Jamaica for what it is. So my dream is, Mr. President, is that we will get to a place where when we mention cities like I have mentioned before, that the city of Montego Bay or the town of Falmouth will be counted among those. I look forward to there not being a continuous decline in what we see as the landscape of Montego Bay and other places, but that we work together to rebuild and renew and incentivize not only the building and the renewal, but also the maintenance, because maintenance has proven to be a major part of why we are even having this conversation. So with those few words of a few minutes, I give support to the bill, but I ask that we bear in mind that as we look forward to the development and redevelopment of our towns and cities, we do so with all hands on deck, ensuring that all Jamaicans benefit from this process. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Allen. Senator Williams.
I see barman that has a lot of respect for Kingston College. I've always said to persons, you know, without a Kingston College, you wouldn't have as much life in sporting activities across the municipality with respect to schools. No. Kingston College helps Calabar to be Calabar. And I have enjoyed the rivalry over the years. I myself participated in it at the level of Manning Cup. So I understand the rivalry, and I enjoyed it, and I still enjoy it. And it's always quite mature, mostly mature. And as a matter of fact, I played the Walker Cup semi-final in the National Stadium, and we defeated Kingston College.
All of these claims
anyway, that is irrelevant to the matter.
All of these claims, of course, are being made. All of these claims that you are making about sporting prowess are, of course, being made without any evidence whatsoever. But we will accept it on face value.
You know, Mr. President, I'm glad for that intervention, because, you know, there is a newspaper article that I am in on the sports page. Yeah. So you'd have to take up that matter with the Gleaner Company. Anyway, Mr. President, my presentation will be brief but very pointed on some what I figure as relevant issues to the issue of urban renewal, and very appreciative of the government taking the leadership to incentivize or to encourage investors to invest in spaces across urban areas, not just Kingston, but investing in urban areas, and to encourage urban renewal across the country. But in this case, in particular, the city of Kingston. The top challenges facing cities from a World Summit were listed, World Cities Summit, and they were listed as transportation planning and development, economic development and job creation, financing infrastructure projects, housing supply and affordability, and an aging population. So at this World Cities Summit, these were listed as the top challenges, and easily we can understand, and because we experience this within our own urban space. So we understand transportation planning and development. We understand why that would be a major urban challenge confronting us, the issue of financing infrastructure projects. Because we understand if we are going to have urban renewal, then the infrastructure of your urban spaces must be expanded, and also must be expanded in some cases, must be renewed or replaced. And also the issue of housing is very critical. It's not just housing, but affordability. And that is critical because a piece of data I've looked at suggests that 40% of the migration into urban areas will take place in what we call inner cities. So it is, which some feel would exaggerate the issue of economic disparity and the issue of just the infrastructure within communities to support very vibrant and resilient communities. And so that is also an issue that we have to pay attention to, that more and more persons who are coming into urban areas are really, a large number of them are coming into already areas that are not, where the infrastructure is already substandard. And so that is something, as we contemplate urban renewal, that we have to. So the issue of housing and communities and planning communities, quite relevant to urban renewal. The issue of an aging population is also something that we have to really pay attention to. And that also goes back to the issue of leisure and recreation. And we speak about it as walking trails and boardwalks and so forth, because that is also quite relevant to an aging population, and quite relevant in terms of if you look at the the economic burden that can be placed on your health sector if your aging population is not healthy. And affording your aging population the opportunity to walk and exercise and to connect, because connecting with others is important. So we speak about for your aging population, you have your golden age homes and your infirmaries and so forth. But you have to give that particular group the opportunity to connect, because that is also a part of them. It's a lifestyle issue, a part of remaining healthy and still feeling productive, which is, in my estimation, a function of your health. And it's important for the city's economy that you don't create this economic burden on your health system. So that is also something that we have to pay attention to. There is an issue that I want to mention and pay some attention to. It is the issue of the knowledge-based economy, and it's quite relevant to this discussion. As mayor of the city of Kingston, if I'm contemplating urban renewal, I can't contemplate that without looking at the economy of the city. What is going to be the foundation of the city's economy that is going to drive job creation and drive and foster business opportunities. And in my mind, we have to look at the fact that in the real world, the economy is really the knowledge-based economy. So how do we attract knowledge-based entrepreneurs and workers? Because that is important. So it's important that we create them, we retain them, but also attract them. Because to the knowledge-based entrepreneurs and workers, the workplace is borderless. So it's not too important to them. Well, I wouldn't say that. It's important where, but they will go anywhere as long as the right components are there. And that is what is important to me as a city, is that we create the components that will be attractive to these knowledge-based workers and entrepreneurs, because they are the ones that are going to generate the jobs, create businesses, and in a way, in turn, increase the standard of living and the quality of life within your city space. And what is relevant to that, when your planning is very important. So planning and design is important. And so in your planning, you have to look at what would attract these workers and what would create these workers and retain them. So education is very important. I refer to it as, there's not a term for it like that, and I'm giving a new meaning to it. It's deliberate education. You have to focus on particular types of education to create the knowledge-based persons within your city space and retain them, and also to attract others, because others are attracted by your education system. It's someone living elsewhere who wants to come and reside in your city is going to contemplate your education system, because this is where their children are going to be educated. So it's not a decision that they're just coming to live because there is an opportunity to earn. They are also contemplating issues like your education system. How am I going to, or are my children going to be educated? And so far, as a city of Kingston, that is also very important for us, is that we develop an education system that is quite attractive to others, while at the same time creating these knowledge-based workers that's going to drive the economy of your city and give life to it. So that is something that must be a critical component of your urban renewal, I think. Well, for Kingston, must be. Also, Mr. President, the issue of planning and design. there are some elements, and I know one of the speakers, I think believe for Senator Fraser Binns, mentioned the elements of city and planning. And so you really have to look at the issue of allocation of land use for different city elements based on function. Then you have to look at green spaces, areas for conservation, which is also very critical, and transportation, ways and lines. And then your central business districts, your housing and industries and utilities. All of that is required in the planning and designing of cities, and is very important in the pursuance of urban renewal. On this note, Mr. President, I would like to commend the government under the leadership of the Most Honourable Prime Minister for moving the Provisional Development Order to its rightful end. The government is very committed to moving the Provisional Development Order to its end. Because we know we are not at the end of the Provisional Development Order, we were reminded of that in our recent court decision. And so that is something that is taking place. And it's important. And I'll just take this opportunity to mention about 3 areas in the development order that I'm just going to highlight and to say how important those are as against the original development order. So the new Provisional Development Order, the 2017 Provisional Development Order, for the first time, the entire area of Kingston and St. Andrew is designated a development order area. This is not the case under the original development order. So the entire Kingston and St. Andrew is designated a development order area, including the Pedro Keys. We're still talking about urban renewal, quite relevant to it. Also, prior to the new development order, prior to the Provisional Development Order, the planning authorities were only required to consult the NAA when applications were made. Yes. This created uncertainty as to whether any other entity should be consulted or what should be the nature and extent of their role. Under the Provisional Development Order, the Provisional Development Order specifically requires that before planning permission is granted, consultation should take place with specific entities. This is quite different from the original, including the NWC, Water Resources Authority, MOH, Ministry of Health and Wellness, ODPEM, NRCA, etc. So this is also something that I would like to just point out, that this is really building on the original development order, and quite useful, because it rids us of a lot of uncertainties. And the final thing I want to mention on the Provisional Development Order, and why it is important, is the issue of the change of use, what they refer to as use classes. And the Provisional Development Order has expanded the list, and by virtue of that has brought clarity to a lot of issues. And I'll just give an example so you understand what I'm saying. Let's say you have a travel, let's say it's a shop, like an internet cafe shop, for example, and you are changing from an internet cafe shop to a travel agency. That doesn't require a change of use application, because the new development order, because the Provisional Development Order has expanded the list and has brought clarity, it has expanded the list so you know that you're within the same use class. So you're not required, because you're not required to act for change of use if you're within the same use class. But let's say you're moving from an internet cafe shop to a financial service business, then you are required to apply for the change of use. this wasn't so clear under the original development order. So in a lot of cases, people would just go and do it, and then you're told that you have to apply. Or in some cases, they don't apply, and then they are told that they have to apply. So there is clarity here. Just one other example. Let's say you have a residential institution, like a Golden Age home, with it. And it's a residential institution. It's separate from a dwelling house. It's separate. So if you're converting a dwelling house into an infirmary or a Golden Age home, then you would have to apply for the change of use. This provisional development order really makes it clear and brings clarity to it, and it's very important. And so the government is leading in terms of its role in terms of planning, and that is very important when you're dealing with urban renewal, that the government takes its role as on its obligation and lead in terms of planning. Mr. President, the issue of history and culture and the role history and culture play in urban renewal. The Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation is committed to integrating history and culture within many of our urban spaces. It's also very important which I'll get to shortly, the issue of tourism. So our urban spaces and recreational spaces, our policy position on it in terms of, from the point of view of the municipality, is not just to create recreational spaces for recreational spaces purpose. It's also it's really allowing people to leisure while at the same time interacting with their history and culture. And so it's really capturing people in the moment of leisure and bringing the knowledge of your history and culture by allowing you to interact with it in various spaces across the municipality. So those spaces are quite very relevant to your urban renewal. So and it has to be a deliberate effort to ensure that you integrate your history and culture within your urban life. And that is what that is basically a major policy position of the municipality. So when we talk about culture key, where we are using street art and murals to tell for example, our music history, where we're coming from in terms of the music. But you're creating a space also for people just to come and leisure and walk in. Some people to videotape, some people just to take photos and so forth. But at the same time, while they're doing all of that, they have to interact with this quite relevant piece of history or culture within Kingston. And so that has to be deliberately and delicately crafted to achieve what we want to achieve. But that is something that we're pursuing, and we think is very important to our urban renewal. The other issue is, I want to get to know, Mr. President, which is very major for us, is the issue of tourism. And it's built on the vision and the policy position of Kingston as a destination city. Now, how are we going to provide the catalyst for the urban renewal we are looking for? Or are we going to inject investment and energy and belief into this new Kingston or this transformation of Kingston? And I believe that the issue of the Kingston pursuing the path of a destination city, of a tourist city, is quite relevant and linked to that belief and energy. And therefore, this is something that we have been pursuing. The issue of tourism and tourism is very relevant because travel and tourism cuts across sectors. So if you look on a piece of data, for example, there is a piece of data. Let me see what it is. Tourism and travel accounted for 10.4% of global GDP, including direct, indirect, and induced impacts. But the direct contribution is about 3%. It's about 3%. So the indirect contribution is 10.4% to GDP, while the direct is 3%. So you realize the indirect contribution is huge. And why is it so? It is so because tourism is cutting across sectors, which means that for me as a mayor of Kingston, it is very important, because if you infuse tourism into Kingston, then your development is across sectors. You're developing facilities in the municipality across sectors, meaning facilities are being developed for the purpose of tourism, but they have added benefits and very important and relevant benefits to your own population and to the general development of the city. And so that is important. That is why we see the pursuit of Kingston as a destination city as very important, because it is also causing the development of facilities and infrastructure that is in a general way beneficial to the city and probably would otherwise not have been done. So I hope you understand why the Kingston as a destination city is very important to us. Now, some may feel that it's far off. I don't. For example, if you look at stopover arrivals in January 2020, a few months ago, the figure was 227,200. I'm talking about for the entire island now, with an average length of stay of 9 days. This recorded an increase of 4.9% over January 2019. So it's an increase. Good news, probably, yes. We are getting some increase now. Now, in Kingston, stopover arrivals, which is 9.2% of overall stopover arrivals for the country. For Kingston, it was 21,014, with an average length of stay of 15 days. So the length of stay for Kingston is higher than the national length of stay. Kingston recorded a 15.3% increase in stopover arrivals over January 2019 and a 28.4% increase over January 2018. So Kingston's 9.2% share of stopover arrivals in January 2020 is higher than Port Antonio and the Mandeville South Coast. And look at it, the average length of stay in Kingston is 15 days compared to 6.8 in Montego Bay and 8.1 and 8.4 in Ocho Rios and Negril. Now, we are nowhere near Montego Bay or Negril or Ocho Rios. But the warning is, and it is very clear that the signs are beginning to show that Kingston can become a destination city, and in the future, a major center for travel and tourism. That's a vision we have for Kingston. And that's a vision we are pursuing, and we believe that that is quite relevant to the urban renewal efforts. The government of Jamaica has been very active in this effort, and the government has supported many major projects that is intended to develop the city and transform the city. For example, if you look at the Agley Park road expansion, the Constant Spring road expansion, the 3 miles, the Portia Simpson Square Mill, the flyover there at 3 miles, and also at Portia Simpson Miller Square. And that is also very important. And if you look at, I've just seen one here, just looking at it, the sewage, the NWC sewage extension infrastructure projects. Those are happening right across the municipality and very, very important to your urban renewal efforts and very important to the growth and development of the city. I end by saying, the road infrastructure is critical to our urban renewal. And for us at the KSAMC, it's not just about road infrastructure renewal. It's also about looking at these remote and rural communities within the municipality and connecting those rural remote communities to the main arterial roadways so that you have the ease of entering the commercial centers of the city. This, we believe, is very important to the economic strength and life of the city of Kingston, which is part of the renewal of the city. So the focus has to be on our road infrastructure. And it's not just roads, repairing roads, it's targeting the roads that we repair so that we connect our rural communities to our urban centers, to our commercial centers, which is going to, in turn, Senator Hill, drive economic activities within the city of Kingston, which in turn will create a pretty good economy within the city. So that is something that we are focused on, and that is something that is very important to our urban renewal. I finally end by saying, and there are many things that we could have mentioned, but we can't go through all of that. The issue of the infrastructure connecting St. Thomas and connecting from our standpoint, now this is from the municipality standpoint, we see the infrastructure connecting St. Thomas and connecting St. Mary in particular, for me, Port and Untitled is important to the growth and development of the city of Kingston. The benefit is mutual, of course. St. Thomas would benefit from that also, and Untitled. But Kingston, we refer to it as helping hands. The growth and development of Kingston, in my estimation, requires the connection with these. I'm just using these two as example. Connection with St. Thomas, because it's like 15 minutes with a proper road infrastructure from St. Thomas to Kingston. It presents for us not just a, well, let's not get too much into that, but you can understand the movement of labor from St. Thomas into Kingston, and also it's for our own market and commerce. And the same would be true if the infrastructure connecting Kingston to Untitled was, well, at the end of that road improvement effort, then that would also be relevant to the urban and quite important to urban renewal in the city and the growth of the city. A major catalyst project is, Senator Brian mentioned, is the new parliament and the government oval. That is a major transformational project that, in my estimation, will also serve as a catalyst to the general redevelopment of the city. What we're about is injecting life in the city and injecting life in sections of the city. And that the injection of life and activity in the city is also part of spurring investors to invest in the city. And is part of investor confidence. So part of what we are doing at the municipality and the government as a whole is taking these small steps in order to increase the confidence of investors. Because investors will invest as their confidence in the renewal and the redevelopment effort, as that confidence grows. And so that is very, very important that we take these little steps, but meaningful steps, to enhance the confidence of our investors. So, Senator Braham, I know you have said that not a lot of offers be taken up, but it's a trying process. It's a process that requires patience, and a lot of patience, but belief. And we believe in the redevelopment of the city. We believe in the growth and development of the city of Kingston. We believe that it is perfect for a major tourist destination. It has all the attributes of that. It's not a destination for a vacation. That's not what we offer in Kingston. We offer culture. We are an entertainment capital. We are a creative city of music. We are rich in history. We have major historical and archaeological sites in the city, such as the Port Royal, Blue and the John Crow Mountains. So we bring a difference in terms of what we offer. And what we are seeing is that visitors across the globe, and this is what we see, is that more and a far greater percentage of persons are traveling to and prefer travel to cities. And not just primarily for vacation on a beach side. That's basically what we're picking up, which means that we can position Kingston because of its richness in culture and history. We can position Kingston to take advantage of this, which means that we have to develop and redevelop our spaces across Kingston and in the downtown area. Mr. President, I end now by saying, the issue raised about the mixed use is quite relevant, As a matter of fact, I'm quite aware of some projects that have some project proposals that are under the radar at this time, and I'm not privy to speak about, but that are really in this direction of this mixed use of residential, commercial kind of setting. In the downtown area, I mean, I've seen some proposals for that in major sections of the downtown. If we get these projects off, then these projects will also serve as catalysts for further development and further projects, which will continue the build out of the city. I've seen Burger King and I've seen other fast food chain restaurants come into the downtown space. Looking as mayor of the city, I believe that there is a need, and I'm just saying it now because I want these investors to begin to think, the fast food chain type investors, that there is a need to locate within the downtown of the city an area with a chain of fast food restaurants. And in my estimation, that would be quite welcoming. And that is something that, as mayor of the city, I would urge these persons to begin to look at least just begin to explore and contemplate that there can be and would probably be very profitable over the next 5 to 10 years and beyond if we locate within the city an area just where you have a series of fast food restaurants. That would bring life to that space, and that would concentrate a lot of persons in that space, which would be important. So, Mr. President, I know I've been very long, but I hope what I have said would have been useful to the members of the Senate. Thank you very much for
Thank you for that very lively presentation, Senator Williams. I'm looking forward to your State of the Nation presentation. Senator Morris.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise to contribute to this bill, but you know, Mr. President, you challenged my friend's footballing prowess. And I have to tell you that, you know, in my days of watching him playing football, I labeled him as Little Adji. Adji was a one of those top European footballers, midfielders, in the early 1990s, dominated World Cup, and you know that was how Delroy was like on the football field. And you know, Mr. President, it's not just him alone, you know, because he has a brother downstairs in the other house who was a footballer of no mean order as well, you know, and no. I mean, when you talk about football on the university campus, that is Taylor Hall. That's where it starts and where it ends. That's right. So you don't, and remember, Mr. Senator Brown, you shouldn't do that because the color of Taylor Hall is blue, and you are very much familiar, you and the president, with that color. But Mr. President,
Senator Morris, before you start your presentation, on at least one occasion, it was my intention to mention, you can have a seat. At least on one occasion, it was my intention to bring to the Senate certain particulars, but you were not here when the opportunity arose. So I'm going to bring to the attention of your colleagues now that Senator Morris was recently awarded the Anthony Sabga Caribbean Laureate Award for Excellence in Civic and Public Service for the year 2020. This award is given to persons in recognition of their significant Caribbean achievement and seeks to highlight and encourage and support the pursuit of excellence by Caribbean persons for the benefit of the region. So I place it on the record and ask the members to acknowledge accordingly. Another, and I say this without hesitation, another significant achievement by our colleague.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your recognition, and thanks to the honourable members of the Chamber. Mr. President, I am making my contribution to the presentation based on Senator Sophia Fraser-Binns' mention of persons with disabilities, and also in light of the presentation that my friend Senator Williams made just now. And I want to start out, by saying, and Senator Williams, I do agree with you that if you're going to renew any city or any town or any community, the development of roads, very significant. As a matter of fact, there was a minister who used to say the road to development is the development of roads. And the fact is that when we were government, we paid a significant attention to that. And that is why efforts were placed on building out the North Coast Highway spanning from Negril to Port Antonio, which opened up all of those opportunities along towns spanning Falmouth, coming through St. James, Montego Bay, coming through Ocho coming through Port Maria, all the way into Port Antonio. Significant. And we see right now there is a significant land grab on the North Coast because it is the choice place to go and hang out on the weekend and to even live, you know. So you see what happens there. And then I remember when we first built the Old Harbour bypass, and then we saw it fit to expand that to the now P.J. Patterson Highway. And we see all the developments that have taken place spanning the southern corridor of the island thus far. And your administration, the government, is currently embarking on the southwest, is that the southwest highway that is going from Clarendon down into Westmoreland. And what you're going to see happening is further expansion of communities along it. So we support and we believe that we have to build out the road infrastructure to make sure that, you know, it facilitates the growth and development of communities, the growth and development of towns, and the growth and development of our cities. But, you know, Mr. President, in my academic work, I have done some research on and gotten them published in two prominent international journals. One entitled Accessible and Inclusive City, Can Kingston, Jamaica Measure Up? And Your Worship, I must tell you that I had to give the city a failing grade in terms of its accessibility to persons with disabilities. And when you look at the infrastructure throughout the city, whether it be in terms of housing, whether it be in terms of health facilities, whether it in terms of our green spaces, by and large, they are inaccessible to persons with disabilities, not to mention the sidewalks in the city. And you mentioned very well about tourism and its prospect for the city of Kingston. And it has tremendous prospects. And here I want to put to you, Mr. President, globally, in England or Britain, there is what is referred to as the purple pound, Madam Minister, leader of government business. The purple pound, which really looks at the strength of the dollar value of persons with disabilities in the UK. And the dollar value is over 350 billion pounds. 350 billion pounds. These are individuals who have fought wars. These are individuals, a lot of senior citizens who have retired, and they have retired with significant pension and savings and so forth. They want to travel, but when they leave out of their society, when they leave out of their country, the infrastructure outside are by and large inaccessible. And that is a challenge for you now, Your Worship, that I am prepared to work with you on, to make the city more accessible for persons with disabilities locally first, and then make it available to tourists who want to come to the city to visit and see what Bob Marley has done, to go down in Trench Town, to go up to Hope Road where he has his museum, and, you know, I mean, go to Port Royal and see what is offering there. The first governor with a disability inside the English-speaking Caribbean, Sir Henry Morgan. Make sure that we market the city within that context as a disabled-friendly destination. And I am prepared to work with you on that. But included in this bill, Mr. President, are some provisions that can assist the efforts of the mayor in a tremendous way, because it speaks to the incentive mechanisms that are there to facilitate urban renewal. And one of the challenges, Minister, one of the challenges that I've had is how governments, plural, you on that side, we on that side when we are government, how we use incentives to stimulate national development and to meet certain international objectives. We have signed the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and we have also signed on to the Sustainable Development Goals. And it requires that we put certain things in place by 2030 to facilitate the general development of the society, but also there are specific targets in the Sustainable Development Goals for persons with disabilities. And included in that is to make our cities and towns accessible for these individuals. But I don't see us using the incentive mechanisms properly to tie it into these national and international objectives. It's as if we just put in the incentives because, boy, we want to get some investment, but, you know, we're not linking it to some broader objectives that we have. And I want to suggest, Mr. President, to the minister that we start indexing some of these incentive mechanisms to development objectives for groups such as persons with disabilities, tying it to employing persons with disabilities, tying it to ensuring that the facilities in the city are accessible for persons with disabilities. And one way that we are going to ensure that is done, Minister, you mentioned that there is a committee that is set up to deal with the incentive mechanism. What was the name of the committee, Minister? Okay, well, the
Recommendation Committee, IRC.
Okay, all right, that is the committee. Now, it comprises a number of individuals from different entities. And I want to suggest that for a very important committee of that nature, that the government take a decision that because you're linking now the incentives for urban renewal to improvement for persons or facilities for persons with disabilities, get somebody from the disabled community, from the Combined Disabilities Association, to be a part of that committee to make sure that the development that is taking place is inclusive of persons with disabilities. Remember, you know, Mr. President, we are in an era where we're focusing on the rights of persons with disabilities. Very soon, well, I shouldn't say very soon, but the government, through the Governor General, has indicated that the Disabilities Act will be implemented this year. And if all of these things are to happen, there has to be a coordinated, cohesive approach in terms of the development strategy. And we have an international slogan that says, nothing about us without us in the community of persons with disabilities. Meaning that if you're going to facilitate development, make sure that you include us with disabilities in it, because oftentimes people do things and they don't even know what they are doing. Sometimes, Mr. President, I go some places and I see some people build some things that they say is a ramp, but it's more a hill than a ramp. And I don't mean Senator Arby Hill, you know. It's more a mountain than a ramp. Eh? And so we have to make sure that we include persons with disabilities in the development process. And I am suggesting, Minister, that on that committee, a member of the community of persons with disabilities be brought in to ensure that what developers say they are doing, they are actually doing and not just benefiting from the incentives that government are putting down just like that. And I want to strongly urge and request that that be considered in going forward, because we're talking about inclusive development and to make sure that persons with disabilities are brought in the mainstream of Jamaican society. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Morris. Senator Hill, Minister Hill, I should say.
Mr. President, I really thank my colleagues for participating as they did in the Urban Renewal Act amendments. Thank you. And right at the outset, Mr. President, I'd just like to emphasize that while we talk about investors coming in and invest, and incentives have to be geared because it's a tax benefit in the end to a group of investors, the whole idea, the policy thrust, the drive behind this set of amendments and the act is to make sure that people who live in communities that have existed for quite a long time, hundreds of years in some instances, decades, many, many more instances, after a while, everything needs renewal. You can't just use and benefit from anything, whether it's an airplane, a car, or a city, without renewing it. And the whole idea of these set of incentives is to make sure investors invest in such a way that people living in the communities will benefit. But I take the comment, Mr. President, that you can't just assume that people who live in these areas will benefit, because after all, people, including well-intentioned investors, do look after their own self-interest. So it's the government's policy that these incentives are there to end what is for many, and as referred to by Senator Fraser-Binns, an unending cycle of poverty in some inner city areas. And it's not just Kingston, it's elsewhere as well. And these incentives are to encourage investors who would not normally look at an existing place that has gone through decay, but would rather look at developing a brand new greenfield set of 500 houses and new everything, and it's easier. But to come into a place where people live, where there are sewer systems, where there are buildings that are decrepit in some instance, and put in your money, it's hard to do. But also, there are other things that the government is doing to augment and support and build. Prime Minister announced that we're going to build 70,000 houses in the next few years. 10,000 of those at least will be for people who can buy houses for $8 million or less. It's not for only friends of rich senators, I'm saying, Senator Brown. It's of people who really sometimes are starting their house for the first time. Maybe they and their partners will come together, get a first NHT mortgage, and can manage to get to $6 or $8 million. But those houses, the Prime Minister has directed and, in fact, making sure that some existing arrangements are changed to ensure that those 10,000 houses that are priced at $8 million or less will happen. And that, I can assure you, many of those will be in inner city areas. And when that happens, people then live differently and behave differently. Your built space very often decides how you behave. And when you have built space of zinc fences and no roads and questionable bathroom facilities, you behave differently than if you own your own house, small as it might be, but nice and clean and is yours. You behave differently. And we mean for that to happen. But we're also looking at the infrastructure. I can tell you, and His Worship the Mayor mentioned it, and before him, Senator Braham from the UDC, we are looking to overhaul completely the sewage system downtown. Why? Because, yes, please, it's worthwhile. And when I tell you that the overhaul is probably going to be $800 million, as estimated by Castalia, a well-respected water consultancy, you should clap again, because it's going to be major and important. You cannot build tall buildings and other buildings for ordinary people to live in unless you have good sewage and good water, and we don't have it downtown. Some of it is over 100 years old. We're going to change it. But, Mr. President, I'm going to keep much of that for my State of the Nation report. So I move on. Don't say that. Behave yourself. There is, and Senator Samuda is right next to me, and he is driving this with Minister Chang. There are significant investments going into the security services in our towns, and especially downtown Kingston, because as towns decay, because like everything else, if you don't maintain it, it decays. As towns decay, security becomes a big issue. As more people live in a smaller space, security becomes a big issue. And so the government is also investing. It's part of, if you will, Senator Fraser-Binns, the macro-level investments that must be in place if you're going to improve a downtown area. Unless you have those macro incentives, investments in place for the infrastructure, investors won't come. They can't, because they can't put in water. They can't put in sewage. They can't put in light. It has to come from the central government. But when we put those in, we must invite private investors, which is what the Urban Renewal Tax Incentive Act does. So it all fits together neatly into one. And then, of course, Senator Williams, His Worship the Mayor, rightly wrapped all the infrastructure upgrades into the urban renewal system. Everything you see on Constant Spring Road, and Hagley Park Road, and the 3 flyovers at Portia Simpson Miller Highway and Expressway, and all those things in place, all that system going in from the new $60 million sewage system we're putting in from 3 miles or 6 miles to Port Royal is all part of that infrastructure. The mayor wrapped that in nicely. And I want to give you an anecdote that I had this week. 2 people who are down here, unfortunately for Michael Sharp's funeral arrangements, and sorry to see him go. He has served the country very well. He has been an icon, and we recognize Michael Sharp for what he has done, many others as well, and we're sad to see him go. But I was talking to 2 of those ladies, and they hadn't been here for maybe a year and a half, maybe even less. But they said, when we drove up Constant Spring Road and Hagley Park Road, we had to tell, they have a driver, we had to tell the driver to take us all the way down the road. Then we see these flyovers, we couldn't believe these aren't, them live in New York, you know, big New York. And they came down here and were extremely praiseworthy of the changes that we're seeing. We must continue. It's part of that overall infrastructure that is about urban renewal. This, of course, Mr. President, is a professional rendition of the Urban Renewal Act. So, what we accept comments that come from all the area. So, Mr. President, when we look at that infrastructure of the whole city, and Senator Janice Allen mentioned Montego Bay, not forgetting that at all. The inner city of all our cities, over time, in fact, the outer parts of the cities as well, need renewal. So renewal is coming to Montego Bay, has been coming to Montego Bay, and I can tell you in a big way is coming to Montego Bay. And not just a lovely park that has a great view, according to what you said to us, that was built by the UDC about a year ago. So we get the timing right. Not 95 as Senator Brown might want to refer to. But having said that all that is being built to make sure that there are parts of a city that you cannot just put in infrastructure and leave it. And because it is so well used and sometimes so long forgotten in terms of maintenance and renewal, we have to give incentives for people to come in and invest. And that's what the Urban Renewal Tax Relief Act Amendment 2021 is about. And so, Mr. President, we're pleased to see that this is being done now. It's clear why we're doing it, and I will not sit down before I address the issue that is so close to Senator Morris's heart. Fixing our city to be accessible, very accessible, to people who have disabilities, whatever they are. And His Worship the Mayor is here. He knows how I feel. I know how he feels. And when you and your council, Mr. Mayor, are passing these acts, one thing, everybody else can look at the rest of the stuff. But Senator Morris and I are holding you in charge, just like you're holding me, and Senator Bryan holding me to go and find money for the government oval, which I don't want to forget. It's going to change this city. The government oval with the Parliament building and the ministries around it, and of course building right down to the waterfront, and turn the waterfront into a wonderful corniche that you can walk on Boulevard, Senator Bryan, from downtown to Port Royal. Not a mayor walkway. Okay? So we'll turn the corniche into a place where you can walk. All that is being done, but must be done bearing in mind the needs of those of us in our society who have a right to enjoy them but suffer certain disabilities. They must be accommodated. Mr. President, I say to you that this act, the amendment of this act, is to bless and prosper ordinary people in decaying towns and cities. And with that, I ask for the second reading of the bill.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Senator Hill. The question is that the bill be read for a second time. Those in favor? Aye. Against?
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Urban Renewal Tax Relief Act, read a second time.
The Senate will now resolve itself into a commission of the whole Senate to consider the bill clause by clause. Thank you, Mr. Marshall. I put clause 1. Those in favor? Against? I put clause 2. Those in favor? I put clause 2. Those in favor? Yes, Madam Clerk. I put clause 3. Those in favor? Against? Clause 3. There's a proposed amendment for clause 3, Minister.
Yeah, not so much an amendment, Mr. President, but there's a typo. After section 3, it says 1 in bracket. That 1 in bracket should be removed, and that's it.
Thank you very much. So
section 3 of the Principal Act is how it should read then. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So I put clause 3. Those in favor? Against? Ayes have it. I put clauses 4 and 5. Those in favor? Against? I put clause 6 and clauses 7. Those in favor? Against? Ayes have it. I put the title and enacting clause. Those in favor? Against? The question is that I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Those in favor? Against? I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment.
Mr. President, I now ask that the bill be read a third time.
That is the question. Those in favor? Against? Madam Clerk?
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Urban Renewal Tax Relief Act, read a third time and passed.
Thank you very much. I propose to rise for 20 minutes to allow the staff to refresh themselves. Any objection to that? Okay, thank you very much. The Senate will know it's 2:15 approximately. Beg your pardon? Yeah, we will resume at 2:45. It's 2:45 just about. I'll resume at 3:15. Okay? Pardon? Yes, that's it. Thank you. This Senate is now suspended until 3:15. Here you go.